Chapter 1150. Yu Zhong, who was fighting Kagura and Batu, was not in a good state either. Although the outcome had not been decided, the 4 green snakes around Yu Zhong had been completely killed, and even one of his wings had been cut off. As for Batu and Kagura, although they were covered in wounds, they had not lost their ability to fight and were still staring at him covetously. Especially Batu. This fellow's priesthood was originally war and conquest, and he also had the luck of the northern frontier. While fighting Yu Zhong, he also dragged Yu Zhong into the war god domain. The more intense the battle between the two sides, the more terrifying the boost Batu received. In addition, although Kagura's priesthood was in charge of harvest, she could still use some simple incense power. While she was frantically healing Batu's injuries, she was also constantly creating obstructive traps for Yu Zhong. Yu Zhong even had a bad premonition. If this continued, he might not be a match for these 2 new gods. However, this was normal. After all, these prehistoric creatures were extremely powerful, but there was a limit to the world's capacity. They could not fully unleash their peak combat strength, and they did not have time to bring all their belongings when they fled, especially on the home ground of the northern frontier. Yu Zhong was indeed the sea god of the North Sea, but the northern frontier was not his dojo. If he wanted to exercise the priesthood of the sea god of the northern frontier, he had to see if the dragon king of the northern frontier was willing to give him face. He could fight against 2 people by himself because of the abundant incense power he had accumulated in the past. However, no matter how abundant it was, there was a limit. The human world worshipped the northern celestial emperor, Xuanxu. Even though Xuanxu later handed over the priesthood of the northern celestial emperor to his minister, Xianming, people still worship Xuanming's incarnation, Zhenwu the Great Emperor. It had nothing to do with him, the sea god of the North Sea. After Lin Yuan's era, people did not even believe in Xuanxu, let alone care about the identity of the sea god of the North Sea. At this moment, the scales of victory had begun to tilt towards the northern frontier. Yu Zhong flapped his wings and forced Batu to retreat. He roared, "Di Shang, what are you waiting for?" Di Shang. When he heard this name, Lin Yuan could not help but be slightly stunned. The prehistoric creatures watching the battle could not help but hold their breaths. After the fall of the Shang dynasty and before the reign of Qin Shi Huang, there was only one human king in the world. In the 800 years of the Zhou dynasty and the later spring and autumn period and the Warring States period, the rulers were basically the son of heaven and not the human king. Those in the Warring States period were not even the son of heaven, but only the king of vassals. To the high and mighty creatures in the untainted land, no one cared about the life and death of these vassals except for the Grand Supremes and other powerful people who had set up the human world. But Di Shang was different. Other than Shangqing Tianzuan, they either hid from the world like Hanba, or they had more or less fought with Di Shang. These mighty people from the prehistoric world knew very well how terrifying the human king who carried the will of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors was. In the prehistoric world, he forced Hong Jun, who was the ruler at that time, to want to get rid of him, but he was helpless. He could only set off a calamity and joined hands with the heavenly Tao to cultivate the emperor of Zhou. He even caused the Ren school, Chan school, and Western school to join hands and almost defeat the Shang dynasty. In the end, the battle was so intense that even the 6 saints of heaven had to join the battle. From this point alone, it could be seen how terrifying the Shang dynasty, who dared to compete with heaven, was. Originally, the northern frontier could be considered a sure win. However, if Di Shang was involved, and Di Shang was on the same side as Yu Zhong, even if the remaining few joined forces, they could not defeat Di Shang. But it should not be. The human king who was crazily discredited was not like what was recorded in the ancient books that were passed down to later generations. First of all, Di Shang could be said to be the first person to break the concept of class. As long as a slave was capable enough, Di Shang could allow him to hold an important position. Those nobles with noble bloodlines, if they were not capable enough, Di Shang would definitely not appoint them. Even gender was not that important in Di Shang's eyes. Compared to the stories of female generals like Hua Mulan that were fabricated, Di Shang had a female general like Fu Hao in this dynasty. Secondly, Di Shang did not believe in the system of God's bestowal of monarchs. Even the Zhou rights requirement of seniority was not worth mentioning in Di Shang's eyes. Queen Jiang had 2 sons, but none of them were successful. If they ascended the throne, they would definitely become the son of heaven and not the human king. Therefore, Di Shang wanted to appoint Wu Geng, who was born by Daji, as the crown prince. During the Shang dynasty, Di Shang's action could be said to have offended the upper class. Daji was not the demon concubine that was later sung. Instead, she was concubine Xian, who had made countless contributions to the Shang dynasty. Taking a closer look at what the officials of the Shang dynasty did, they were all eating the rice of the Shang dynasty, but they repeatedly helped the feudal lords to rebel. Bai Gan and the others were all traitors. On the contrary, Fei Lian and Lai, who were known as traitors, accompanied Di Shang to the end of their lives and had never betrayed him. Loyalty and treachery could be seen at a glance. However, history was a little girl who could be dressed by anyone. That was why many people misunderstood the people of that period. More importantly, anyone who had participated in the investiture of God's tribulation knew how crazy Di Shang was at the end of the war. The Zhou dynasty would only record that the marquises rose up to support King Wen of Zhou and King Wu of Zhou. However, they did not mention in detail what the Yinshang had done to make so many marquises support a poor and destitute West Qi. They would only record that Di Xian was raped at Jiaxing Tower. However, they would not tell the later generations about the huge loss that Di Xian had brought to the Zhou dynasty. Similarly, they would not record that if Di Xian's two sons had not betrayed him and opened the city gate to welcome the allied forces of the marquises into Zhaoga, Di Xian could have defeated the allied forces of the marquises without shedding any blood. However, when people studied this period of history, they would always find something strange. For example, the people of the Shang dynasty would rather die than eat a grain of rice of the Zhou dynasty. Many people did not even consider themselves as people of the Zhou dynasty, but called themselves the remnants of the Shang dynasty. There was also Di Shang's son, Wu Geng. Why didn't GFA dare to kill Wu Geng when the Shang dynasty was destroyed? Instead, he gave Wu Geng a fief and made Wu Geng a feudal lord? If Wu Geng's ability was not as good as Di Shang's, the Zhou dynasty would never have the fortune of 800 years. Did Di Shang sleep in Jiaxing Lu because he was afraid of being judged by the Zhou dynasty? Wrong. Di Shang's sleep in Jiaxing Lu was not because he was afraid of the judgment of the Zhou dynasty. On the other hand, it was the most powerful counterattack of a human king against a group of traitors at the last moment. If Di Shang did not rape, Wu Geng would not have lived to the next day. The rulers of the Zhou dynasty never dared to call themselves emperors. Compared to human kings like Di Qi, Di Yu, and Di Shang who used emperor as the prefix, the rulers of the Zhou dynasty always called themselves kings. Chapter 1151. Setting aside the mythological background, the reason why West Qi dared to rebel was that during the Little Ice Age, Di Xian could only continue to expand to the south, which was warmer, to pursue a better place to live and more food for his people. Therefore, the main force of the Shang dynasty had been expanding to the south. After eliminating the tribes in the south, they also assumed the responsibility of guarding the land. Therefore, almost all the people that Di Xian brought back to Zhaoga were wounded soldiers or slaves. In the first battle with the rebels, it was also because of these slaves' rebellion that Di Xian suffered a loss and had to retreat to Zhaoga. Although Lin Yuan was not born in that era, he knew the power of Di Xian's retreat to Zhaoga. At that time, Zhaoga was the capital of the Shang dynasty, but it was also a war fortress against North Di and Dongyi. If Di Xian retreated to Zhaoga, the rebels would not be able to break through the city walls in a short time. This hit the key point of West Qi. What kind of place was West Qi? To put it nicely, it was a paradise that did not close the door at night and did not pick up lost things on the road. To put it bluntly, it was poor. West Qi could not even feed its own army. In addition, the rebellions of the feudal lords all over the country were nominally led by West Qi. There were also the southern slaves who rebelled from Di Xian's army. Therefore, West Qi really could not afford to feed people and horses. On the contrary, Di Xian, who had developed the south, had a large amount of food stored in Zhaoga. Therefore, as long as Di Xian refused to fight, it was equivalent to winning the war and waiting for the rebels to collapse. In the end, the two sons of Queen Zhang and Weizi, who had failed to compete with Di Xian for the throne, opened the strong city gate of Zhaoga without hesitation, making all of Di Xian's schemes a joke. The two sons of Weizi and Di Xian were probably complacent, thinking that they would become the new nobles of the Zhou dynasty. However, the fate of these people was directly erased from the records of the Zhou dynasty. After all, they couldn't possibly say that they couldn't defeat Di Xian and that it was thanks to the betrayal of the traitors that they were able to establish the Zhou dynasty, right? In a novel like The Investiture of the Gods, it was still all right. At the very least, these people were given an ending where they became gods. However, in the official history of the Zhou dynasty, they defeated the tyrant King Di of Shang by relying on their brilliance and domineering aura. These traitors had no part in it at all. After going through all this information in his mind, his first reaction was, King Shang isn't dead. His second reaction was, Yu Jiang was playing a trick? The relationship between Dxin and Hong Jun could be described as irreconcilable. Even if Hong Jun was one with the way of heaven, so what? He was unpopular. Not to mention that the three emperors were guarding the Fire Cloud Cave. Empress Pingxin in the Netherworld had wanted to kill Hong Jun for a long time. These things were not over yet. The Grand Elder abolished his status as a sage of the Way of Heaven and became a sage of the Great Tao. The Grand Master of Heaven schemed against Hong Jun and transcended the untainted land. The origin of the Way of Heaven in the incarnation system had also been stirring up trouble. Although Hong Jun was indeed very strong, it was inevitable that 2 fists could not defeat 4 hands. He tried his best to suppress the appearance of the human Tao and the tunnel in order to maintain this high-pressure ruling status. If Dxin really completed all the plans and promoted Wu Geng, who had been cultivated into a talent, to the throne when he died of old age, it was estimated that the human Tao would appear prominently before the third-generation successor could ascend the throne. At that time, the 3 emperors and 5 sovereigns would appear and cooperate with the Grand Elder and the others to kill Hong Jun. Even if they could not kill him, it would not be a problem to beat him into the void and completely lose the ruling power of the untainted land. Therefore, the existence of Dxin was a thorn in Hong Jun's side and a thorn in his flesh. When the investiture of gods began, those untainted land creatures who were unwilling to obey Hong Jun's rule might escape. However, it was absolutely impossible for Dxin to escape from Hong Jun's eyes. If Hong Jun, who was one with the Way of Heaven, could not even do such a small thing, he would have been killed by other untainted land creatures long ago. Therefore, Dxin must be dead. Even if Dxin was still alive, it was impossible for him to mix with Yu Jiang, who had abandoned the human tribe and cultivated the method of the Western sect. Dxin was an existence that could be ranked as one of the 3 emperors and 5 sovereigns. Whether it was the so-called son of heaven later on or the traitorous son of Yu Jiang, who was a descendant of the human king but abandoned the human tribe, they were all existences that Dxin could not wait to kill. Boom! A figure walked out of the void. Almost at the moment he appeared, he had already raised his halberd and smashed it out, directly breaking the long stick in Batu's hand that was condensed from the power of incense. However, the terrifying power did not stop. The halberd smashed Batu more than 1,000 feet away before he could stop. Even with Batu's strong physical body, his sternum had collapsed and he was gasping for air. His hair was tied up by a golden crown, and he was wearing a chain of armor. He was wearing a red robe with dragons on the outside and a purple robe on the inside. His waist was tied with a battle skirt that depicted walking beasts. In addition, he was holding a sky piercer in his hand and a bronze bell hanging on his waist. When Lin Yuan saw the other party's attire, he had already determined the other party's identity. It was indeed related to Dxin. However, it was not Dxin himself. It was Dxin's second son, the second prince of Yin Shang, Yin Hong. What a waste of the name Dxin. Shangqing Heavenly Lord's expression turned cold as he stared coldly at Yin Hong, who had defeated Batu in one move. Although the human tribe was the main character of the Eldritch world, in the eyes of the almighty figures, it was actually nothing much. Before the human tribe became the main character of the world, there were the innate fiend gods, the 3 races of Dragon and Phoenix and Kirin, as well as the witches and demons. These races were once the main characters of the world. However, these races were born strong and were feared by Hong Jun. He used some means to exterminate and decline them. In addition, although the human tribe was born weak, they were indeed hard-working. The sect master of Ren's school, the Grand Supreme, and Nuwa, who had created the human tribe, endorsed them, did not have much impact on Hong Jun's rule. Therefore, they were designated as the main characters of the world by Hong Jun. However, no one would have thought that they had underestimated the human tribe in the end. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors had created a brilliant era that was filled with legends. Natural disasters, man-made disasters, demons, and ghosts could not destroy the human tribe. Instead, it made the human tribe become stronger and stronger after repeated setbacks. Especially when they were in the hands of Dxin, they almost used the power of Yin Shang to declare war on the Qi refinement cultivators in the world. They kept challenging Hongjuan's authority and finally forced the sages to take action personally before they could destroy Yin Shang. Xian was one of the few human tribe that I, Tong Tian, valued and admired in my life. Yin Hong was just a traitor. First, he betrayed Yin Shang because he was dissatisfied that Xian wanted to pass the throne to Wugang. Later on, he believed Shen Gongbao's words and betrayed Chan's school. He even almost injured Qi Jingzi, who had passed on his abilities and Dharma treasures. Even Huang Feihu, who had once let him off, was captured by him in an attempt to dominate Yin Shang. How could such a scum be given the name Xian? Chapter 1152. The moment he saw Yin Hong, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of seriousness. Putting aside Yin Hong's character, what was certain was that Yin Hong was definitely capable. After all, he was the son of a king. After Xian decided to make Wu Geng the crown prince, Yin Jiao and Yin Hong were heavily nurtured by the Shen men. Not only did they learn a lot of skills, but they were also given a large number of magic treasures. From the looks of it, Yin Hong had brought all these magic treasures over. The Sky Piercer was not considered powerful in the investiture of the gods' tribulation, but it was definitely not an ordinary weapon. After all, it could fight with the weapons of so many powerful people. If it was an ordinary weapon, it would have been shattered long ago. Needless to say, the chain armor and the battle skirt were most likely good items. More importantly, the purple ribbon immortal robe he wore underneath the red robe was a treasure given by Qi Jingzi. After wearing it, one could be said to be invulnerable. Although it was not as powerful as the Supreme's heaven and earth exquisite black and yellow pagoda, it could not be broken by ordinary means. Not to mention, there was also a bronze bell hanging on Yin Hong's waist. It was probably the water and fire edge that appeared in the investiture of the gods. It was also a magic treasure of immortals that could be used to protect oneself. Good fellow, Lin Yuan thought to himself. He was an expert. Although later generations commented that Yin Hong's ability was not good and that he only relied on his magic treasures to be fierce, taking a closer look at Yin Hong's outfit, he was already in an invincible position before he fought with others. If he could beat them, he would smash them with the Sky Piercer. If he could not beat them, he would use the Yin-Yang mirror. No wonder Qi Jingzi, who taught him skills, suffered under Yin Hong's hands. So what if he relied on his magic treasures to be fierce? You don't allow him to use his magic treasures? Dragon King. You're very capable. I've learned a lot. Yin Hong stared at the black Jiao with a smile, but it was a fake smile. His eyes were cold as if he was looking at a corpse. The reputation of the black Jiao in the northern frontier was indeed not fake. Obviously, each of the three schools of Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism had produced an expert. In addition, he had also appeared in Yujiang. At most, he could find someone to hold back the two new deities of the northern frontier. It was a story of 3 against 1. Even if this black Jiao was more formidable, could he really overturn the heavens? Is the prime of Tong Tian powerful enough? In the investiture of the gods' cataclysm, he fought against 4 heavenly sages by himself, but he was still utterly defeated. Lin Yuan also replied with a fake smile and said jokingly, I thought it was really the human king Xian who had come. I was still looking forward to it. I didn't expect it to be the second prince of the Shang dynasty. I wonder if your highness Chen Sui has come to the northern frontier personally. What can I do for you? You! Yin Hong's face turned cold. His qi cultivation had almost been broken. The secular world always liked to curry favor. For example, calling the emperor long live, or the prince long live. Although these people could not live for 1,000 years, at least it sounded comfortable. It was also a very common method of flattery. But the problem was that such a title was not flattery in the cultivation world. It was pointing at the nose and scolding people. Although Yin Hong was not a daluo of the origin and could not live as long as the heaven and earth, he still had a certain cultivation. In the untainted world, when one cultivated to the 3 realms of earthly immortal, divine immortal, and genuine immortal, one's lifespan was already immeasurable. It was just that every period of time, there would be a tribulation. 3 calamities and 9 disasters, and the 5 decay of heaven and man would have to go through once every period of time. If one survived, he would live a carefree life, but if not, he would die and his soul would be destroyed. Even a sage to be at the peak would have to obediently go through the tribulation. Unless one became a daluo and transcended all things, or a sage of a certain path, There was no such thing as an immortal sage. But how long was a period of time? A period of time was 18,000 years, and a period of time was 129,600 years. A period of time was commonly known as a period of time, which was to multiply the two numbers. That was to say, as long as one cultivated to the realm of true immortal, even if he could not go through the first tribulation, he could live for about 1.4 billion years. Although Yin Hong had not reached the realm of true immortal, he was still an immortal. With all his magic treasures, he could easily live for billions of years. Now he was called Your Highness Long Live by Black Jiao, which was no different from Black Jiao pointing at his nose and scolding him as a short-lived ghost. What's more, Yin Hong was also a famous person on the list of deification. He was the lord of 5 grains of the fighting sect and usually lived in the heavenly court. Hao Tian had once refined the star banner left by the ancient demon court and set up the cosmic stars formation. Even in the untainted world, the flow of time in the heavenly court was different from that in the mortal world. As the saying went, 1 day in the heavenly court was 1 year on the earth. If Yin Hong stayed in the heavenly court, his lifespan would be even longer. In the cultivation world, you could point at someone's nose and scold them, but you could never say that they had a short life. As everyone knew, the so-called cultivation was actually fighting against the heavens. If you turned your head and threw it out, 9 out of 10 cultivators were trying to attain immortality. Scolding others for having a short life was much more ruthless than robbing others of their opportunities and treasures. In other words, you were ruining their Taoist heart. Bastard! How dare you bully me? The killing intent in Yin Hong's eyes soared. His body turned into a shadow almost instantly. Just like when he appeared at the beginning, he also came in front of Lin Yuan in an instant. The sky piercer in his hand smashed down. His momentum was so strong that it was like a killing star had appeared. Go! Bu Xingzhou, who had been confronting Lin Yuan, saw the appearance of a strong helper, and his face was immediately filled with joy. He was originally worried that this fierce person who suddenly appeared would casually exchange a few words with the Black Jiao and then lead Yu Jiang away. However, he didn't expect that although the Black Jiao recognized the other party's identity, he didn't give the other party any face at all. Instead, he mocked him as soon as he opened his mouth. This caused the other party to not even have the chance to say the trash talk that he had prepared. He was provoked to the point that he directly attacked. However, even this mocking sentence made many people envious. Cultivation was easy to enter, but the Great Tao was difficult to achieve. This had never been an empty sentence. As for cultivation, as long as one didn't have a naturally terminated meridian and a physique that couldn't absorb the spirit chi of heaven and earth, one could casually obtain a cultivation method and complete the mortal evolution realm that was similar to a mortal martial artist. However, among these cultivators, those who could reach the airborne realm were considered geniuses. Those who could reach the Heaven Star Border realm and Kongming realm were even more rare. Although the Heavenly Gate Guardian's power was incomparably huge, this group of people was understaffed no matter what they did. They had to cultivate their power in the 7 empires. From this point alone, it could be seen how scarce the Heavenly Gate Guardians members were. A lifespan of 1,000 years was actually not long. According to the increase in lifespan of the Tianwu world's cultivation realm, a Heaven Star Border realm cultivator would have a lifespan of at least 800 to 900 years or even 1,000 years. However, even so, it was already not bad if 1 out of 10,000 cultivators could reach the Heaven Star Border realm. To some people, 1,000 years was scolding them for having a short life. However, to others, it was difficult to pursue in their lifetime. Chapter 1153. Lin Yuan was slightly startled by Yin Hong's sudden outburst, and then he smiled with relief. His Highness Chen Sui was not a casual name. In the investiture of the gods, there was a scene where Yin Hong went down the mountain to recruit the 4 generals, and the 4 generals directly called Yin Hong His Highness Chen Sui. However, for Yin Hong, who had just started cultivating at that time, His Highness Chen Sui was still a respectful name, not a curse. But now, after countless years of investiture of the gods, calling Yin Hong His Highness Chen Sui was really a curse for his short life. Besides, Yin Shang had perished, so how could Yin Hong still be a highness? But since he had said it, the Dragon King also cared about his reputation, so he would not change his words or make any explanation. To put it bluntly, it was, I am cursing you, so what? If the 2 traitors, Yin Hong and Yin Zhao, hadn't opened the gate of Zhaoga and led the army of Shiqi into the city, human Tao would have become popular in a few decades. At that time, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, as well as Dxin and later Qin Huang and Han Wu, human Tao would be so prominent that even the way of heaven couldn't cover it. How could the untainted world be dominated by Hong Jun alone? Regardless of his identity as a human, Lin Yuan hated traitors the most in his life. If there was a chance, Lin Yuan really didn't intend to let any of them go. With a thought, for shadows of ancient long swords condensed around Lin Yuan, and a shocking evil spirit and murderous aura suddenly spread out. Yin Hong, who had attacked in anger, suddenly had a change in expression. He forcibly withdrew his sky piercer in mid-air, and his figure flashed hundreds of miles away. He stared at the 4 long sword phantoms around Lin Yuan with a face full of fear. This bastard doesn't care about martial virtues. The natives of the Tianwu world didn't recognize the 4 ancient swords, but how could Yin Hong not recognize them? Why did the sect of Jie dare to challenge the 3 sects of human, Chan, and Western at the same time, and fight against the 4 sages alone? This was because the prime of Tong Tian had mastered the 4 immortal slaying swords. Once he formed the immortal slaying sword array, even the 6 saints would have to avoid it. Although he could see that the 4 ancient swords around Black Jiao were not real, the problem was that he did not have the Tree of 7 Wonders or the exquisite pagoda to fight against the immortal slaying sword formation. After all, he was the son of the human king and had experienced a calamity. He had also served as the 5-grain star sovereign of the Heavenly Court's battle division for many years. He definitely did not lack battle experience. Therefore, he retreated almost instantly and stared at Black Jiao with a face full of fear. He could take a gamble, but the problem was that the yin-yang mirror had already been taken back by red essence. The fire and water edge and the 8 trigrams purple ribbon immortal robe on him were replicas that he had hired with his salary after becoming an official of the Heavenly Courts. They were naturally not as powerful as the original. Even if he used them, they could only withstand 2 ancient swords at most. The remaining 2 ancient swords were enough to kill him. Fortunately, there was still a reckless person who dared to make use of him to attack Black Jiao. It's time for you to test the power of the immortal slaying sword array for me. In an instant, Yin Hong's mind was full of thoughts. Although his face was still gloomy, there was a faint trace of fear in his eyes. This is bad. You scoundrel. Bu Xingzhou saw Yin Hong's face filled with fear as he retreated. How could he not understand that the Black Flood Dragon's 4 sword shadows were so powerful that even this ferocious person who had suddenly appeared was afraid? However, he didn't have Yin Hong's ability. Plus, he had never seen how powerful the Banishing Immortal Sword formation was. He only thought it was one of the Black Flood Dragon's methods. When he saw Yin Hong retreat, it was too late for him to retreat. He could only charge into the Banishing Immortal Sword formation with a face full of anger. Oh, you want to see? I won't let you see. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed and he spat out a green ball of light from his mouth. It was the willow branch bestowed by Patriarch Yang Mei. The willow branch spun in a circle and immediately locked the space, enveloping the immortal slaying sword array within. No matter how much outsiders tried to pry, they would not be able to see how powerful the sword array was to be able to make a hidden danger, a fierce person who had severely injured the god of war of the northern frontier, retreat. However, other than Shangqing Tianzuan and Taoist Red Cloud, who had unfathomable cultivation, no one noticed that a small black that was almost no different from a speck of dust suddenly emerged from the crack in the void when the willow branch sealed the space. The 6 pairs of blood wings on its back flapped and it completely disappeared without a trace. Shangqing Tianzuan's expression changed. Just as he was about to make a move, he saw a jade-like right hand hit his shoulder. He turned his head and saw Taoist Red Cloud's smiling face. Senior brother, one of the 50 escapes from the heavens' divination. This is Black Jiao's tribulation. No matter how deep your hatred is, you should not interfere. As Taoist Red Cloud spoke, the smile on his face became deeper and deeper. He whispered, if you want to change the heavens' design, call your original self here. Shangqing Tianzuan's movement paused slightly. Suddenly he smiled and said, I was wrong. Thank you, junior brother, for your advice. Mosquito Daorin was also an expert who cultivated the great way of space. At his peak, he was even at the sage-to-be level. He was only 1 step away from Zenith Heaven. It was very reasonable for him to seize this opportunity to escape. Whether it was Shangqing Tianzuan, Taoist Red Cloud, or Lin Yuan, all of them should have thought of this. However, Lin Yuan still used the willow branch. Obviously, he had other plans. If Shangqing Tianzuan acted rashly, he might fall into the Black Jiao's trap. Ha ha ha, it's okay, it's okay. Taoist Red Cloud smiled meaningfully. He waved his hand as if he did not care and said, "We are all guests of the Purple Cloud Palace. You are also my senior brother. If you can help, I will naturally not refuse. Since senior brother has seen through it, I will not stay for long. I'm leaving." As soon as he finished speaking, Taoist Red Cloud dispersed into wisps of red mist and dissipated in front of Shangqing Tianzuan. Shangqing Tianzuan touched his head with a puzzled look in his eyes. He murmured, "Why do I feel that although I was not tricked by Black Jiao, I was tricked by Taoist Red Cloud?" After a while, Shangqing Tianzuan blushed and patted his head. He scolded, "Damn it. If it was not for Mosquito Daoren, that bastard, running in front of me, how could I lose my composure like this? I am so angry." Taoist Red Cloud and Shangqing Tianzuan had unknowingly fought once. However, it did not affect the battle between Lin Yuan and Yin Hong. When Yin Hong saw the phantoms of the 4 immortal slaying swords, he was a little scared. After all, the immortal slaying swords formation was too powerful. However, now that he saw a piece of willow branch, Yin Hong was so shocked that he could not help but take a few steps back. There were many powerful figures in the untainted world. However, there were only a few who were especially ruthless. Hung Jun, San Qing, and the like were well known. However, there was one more powerful figure who could make Hung Jun suffer in silence. The hollow willow branch, the ancestor Yang Mei. She could be said to have deduced the great Tao of space to the extreme. She could even fight with Hung Jun, who was in harmony with the great Tao of heaven. Chapter 1154. The ancestor of Yang Mei was a true origin Daluo. No matter which world he went to, he would be a saint. Moreover, there were differences between saints. For example, Hung Jun was also a heavenly path saint, but he could firmly suppress the 6 heavenly sages for countless years. First, he fought a great battle with the ancestor of Yang Mei in the River of Time. Although countless magic treasures were taken away, he still severely injured the ancestor of Yang Mei, forcing the ancestor of Yang Mei to escape into the Sea of Bitterness. The 3 sovereigns were even more miserable. They could only guard the Fire Cloud Cave to barely ensure that they would not be killed by Hung Jun. Empress Pingxin was also suppressed in the Netherworld, unable to interfere with the heavenly realm and the mortal realm. Even the authority of the underworld had been seized by various almighty figures. The ancestor of Yang Mei and the ancestor of Hung Jun were peerless ferocious figures at the top of the food chain no matter which world they were in. The Black Jiao was powerful, but the current Black Jiao was probably not even an earth immortal in the untainted world. The only reason he could fight against him was because the Tianwu world was only a small kiliacosm and he could not use his full strength. How could such an ant hurt the ancestor of Yang Mei, and even pluck a willow branch from the ancestor of Yang Mei? So obviously, this willow branch was personally bestowed by the ancestor of Yang Mei. Hiss! Thinking of this, Yin Hong could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. What the hell was the Black Jiao's background? The fate of the northern frontier was as heavy as a mountain. Obviously, it was blessed by the heavens. All the cultivators who belonged to the northern frontier were blessed by the heavens. Once they started cultivating, not only would their cultivation speed far exceed that of cultivators in other regions, even their bottlenecks and inner demons would be much weaker. Otherwise, the northern frontier would not have been able to cultivate such a terrifying army of cultivators in less than 3 years after its establishment. In addition, the sword shadow of the immortal slaying sword formation could not be summoned by just anyone. This guy might have some connection with sect leader Tong Tian. According to sect leader Tong Tian's personality of teaching without discrimination, the Black Dragon might be a disciple of the tribe of Jia, or even a disciple personally accepted by that person. In terms of seniority, he could be considered a second-generation disciple of the tribe of Jia. Then, shouldn't he have to call him martial uncle? Furthermore, he had a section of ancestor Yang Mei's willow branch. Whether it was capturing or controlling people, he was probably much more powerful than his master Qi Jingzi's school of Yin Yang. Was he still a human? Was there any law? Who was he? Grandson of the Yellow Emperor. Who was he? Son of Xian. Even if 2 descendants of the human king were put together, they might not be as rich as the Black Jiao. The layman watched the show while the expert watched the skill. There was nothing more than this. Originally, Yin Hong was still full of anger. However, after seeing Lin Yuan's background, he suddenly did not want to take action. After all, the Black Jiao's background was really difficult to guess. Just by showing this willow branch, there were less than 5 people in the 4 seas of the untainted land who dared to clamor with Lin Yuan. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's blue and white eyes. He took back the willow branch again. The 4 ancient sword shadows floated beside him. Then, a pile of minced meat fell from the sky. When it fell to the ground, it had already become a pile of meat paste. No one would have thought that this pile of meat paste was a big shot at the level of a transcendent not long ago. Among the experts who spied on the northern frontier, the heterodox sects were still fine. The 3 sects of Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism all sighed with regret. Good heavens, 3 transcendent experts came to the northern frontier to find trouble with the Black Jiao. In the end, they were all wiped out. Song Xuebua was the one who died the most beautifully. At least his corpse was left intact. Look at the divine monk Kong Xiang. At this moment, only his head was left, which had nothing to do with holiness or mercy. Taoism's Bu Xingzhou was even more miserable. He had become a pile of meat paste on the ground. It was estimated that he could not be picked up completely. The guardians of the heavenly gate, who were already few in number, were now in an even worse situation. The Buddhist, Taoist and Confucian sects, who had to join forces to fight against the demon sect, would probably have a harder time in the future. More importantly, after this battle, who would dare to establish a sect in the territory of the northern region? The Black Jiao had already said that they would either split their sects into various aristocratic families and follow the rules of the northern frontier, or they would directly scram out of the Tianwu continent and establish their own sects on the islands of the Endless Sea. They would obediently become his overseas immortal sects. There were also some sects who relied on the fact that they had the support of the guards of the Heavenly Gate and refused to leave the Central Plains or the south of the Shenwu dynasty. They even took the opportunity to seize territory. It was obvious that they wanted to become feudal lords and compete with the northern frontier to see who would replace the Shenwu dynasty as the 7th dynasty. Now, everything was fine. There was no more suspense. Not leaving? You can try if you don't want to leave. Many cultivation forces began to have ideas about the Yingtian temple. After all, everyone knew that the Yingtian temple had been lacking in manpower for so many years. Its strength was at most at the upper level of a second-rate force. Now, it had even offended the Black Jiao of the northern frontier. Even the Immortal Supreme, who was the only one who could shoulder the responsibility after the founder of the sect, was chopped into a pile of meat by the Black Jiao. Didn't this mean that the Yingtian temple was now a piece of fat meat that anyone could take a bite out of? Whether it was the forces that had already decided to disband their sects and split them into aristocratic families, or the forces that continued to be stubborn and insisted on competing with the northern frontier for the position of overlord, at this moment, they had already begun to mobilize their forces and were ready to eat the fat meat that was the Yingtian temple. Whether it was to form a good relationship with the northern frontier or to occupy this territory for themselves, the prerequisite was to destroy the Yingtian temple. The phantoms of the 4 immortal swords returned to their positions. Lin Yuan did not even look at Yin Hong and Yu Jiang. He only squinted his eyes and sized up the severing thunder branch. The severing thunder branch was indeed a good treasure. However, it had been refined by Bu Xingzhou for many years and was completely tied to the fate of the Yingtian temple. If the Yingtian temple became stronger and stronger, the severing thunder branch would also become stronger and stronger. However, if the Yingtian temple was destroyed, the severing thunder branch could only collapse on its own and become a useless pitch-black wooden stick. It might even turn into powder. What a pity! Lin Yuan said with some regret. Although he did not rely on the enhancement of magic treasures, he would not refuse if there was a magic treasure that could be used. The severing thunder branch was a magic treasure that was quite compatible with him. Summoning the wind and summoning the rain was originally the signature skill of the dragon race. In addition, the severing thunder branch could be enhanced in thunderstorms. It could be said that with this treasure, Lin Yuan could create a battlefield where he could become stronger and stronger at any time. Unfortunately, the Dragon King was such a demon who meant what he said. If he said that he would not give any sex a place to survive, then he would not change his words. Moreover, he had previously said that he would destroy the entire Yingtian temple. Is it possible for Lin Yuan to slap his own face? That was obviously impossible. After sighing with emotion, Lin Yuan turned his gaze to Yin Hong and said with a smile, "Your Highness Chen Sui, why did you retreat? Since you have made up your mind to cause trouble for the northern frontier, then, continue." Chapter 1155. Heh. Yin Hong laughed coldly. He waved the halberd in his hand and said in a deep voice, "I have experienced Dragon King's strength. However, is the Dragon King sure that he wants to shed all pretenses of cordiality at this time? Even if the Dragon King wins today's battle, he will need more than 10 years to recuperate. Don't let others take advantage of us." When he finished speaking, many spectators felt their faces twitch. Similarly, Yin Hong did not want to clash head-on with Lin Yuan. However, Yin Hong's level was clearly much higher than that of Yu Jiang and Bu Xingzhou. It was still an unsolved mystery how strong the Black Jiao was when he became serious. Furthermore, the methods of Yin Hong and Yu Jiang, two top-notch experts whose identities were unknown, could not be predicted. If both parties fought to the death, it would be very troublesome no matter who the victor was. In particular, the Black Jiao from the northern frontier was currently in a period of strength. Once he was severely injured at this time, many people would start to target the northern frontier. If they were in his shoes, many top-notch experts felt that they would have to compromise with him. The comprehensive strength of the northern frontier far surpassed that of any of the empires. In fact, with the existence of Lin Yuan, Batu, and Kagura, their foundation would not be inferior to any of the powers other than the Heavenly Gates Protectors. Even the Heavenly Gates Protectors was essentially an alliance. In private, there were countless independent top-notch powers. Currently, the northern frontier had the qualifications to be called a top-notch power. It was an existence that the empires could not compare to. More importantly, the powerful rise of the northern frontier had touched the sensitive nerves of many people. Even though the northern frontier was the only powerful power now, they were certain that once the northern frontier started to exert its power and destroyed the structure of the seven empires, countless people and powers who had previously restrained themselves for various reasons would jump out and try to divide up this sweet cake. Of course, it would be best if they could monopolize it. The reason why the seven empires were able to become rules-based existences was mainly because the various powers kept each other in check and wrestled with each other. In the end, a blueprint that seemed very fair was finally drawn out. However, in reality, the various powers were no longer satisfied with the seven empires being divided and ruled. This could be seen from the constant collisions and killings between the neighboring empires. They ate from their own bowls and stared at other people's pots. This was not a matter of a day or two. In the past, no one had stepped forward to do this because of a tragedy that all reformers had to face, becoming enemies with the world. For example, Qin Shi Huang had swept through the 6 states and started the reform of writing and writing. As he had affected the interests of too many people, his evaluation had repeatedly jumped between that of a great emperor and that of a tyrannical tyrant. For example, Emperor Yang of the Sui dynasty, Yang Guang, was known as an expert in economics. Regardless of whether it was in political or military affairs, he was much more outstanding than his peers later on. However, because he had affected the interests of too many people, he was almost criticized as the first incapable ruler in history. What the northern frontier was doing now was actually similar. Perhaps it was not that great, but there was one thing that was the same. It had affected the interests of too many people. Almost everyone with a discerning eye could see that the northern frontier was able to maintain absolute suppression today. Firstly, it was because Lin Yuan's reforms in the northern frontier had indeed brought about a huge increase. For example, the nationalization of land directly cut off the roots of the aristocratic families, the opening of the Northern Frontier Academy, and the destruction of the sect's rice bowls. If one only talked about it, perhaps anyone could do it. However, if one really did it, one would have to pay a huge price. In fact, everyone was well aware of it. Not to mention the counterattacks from the sects and aristocratic families, and the hostility from the other dynasties, the investment in the northern frontier alone had reached a terrifying astronomical figure. Even though the northern frontier had the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, which was a gold-swallowing beast that even the Heavenly Gate formation was envious of, the northern frontier could still be described as poor. The teachers and students of the Northern Frontier Academy, as well as the officials and soldiers of the various government offices and army in the northern frontier, were all supported by the northern frontier. This was not something that the other dynasties could compare with by giving out salaries.
This was because no dynasty dared to say that all the cultivators or good seedlings who had the intention to cultivate under their rule would be provided by them as long as they were willing to cooperate.
In less than 3 years, the resources invested in the northern frontier were enough to support 2 first-rate sects and still be rich. But then again, was this policy of the northern frontier wrong? Obviously not. Looking at the current northern frontier, there was an endless stream of talents in all aspects. Even if there were no suitable talents locally, there would be an endless stream of talented people from other dynasties coming to seek refuge.
Even some of the sects and aristocratic families that were said to be sworn enemies of the northern frontier had secretly sent many people to the northern frontier to take up positions.
Moreover, they did their best and did not hide their incompetence at all.
To these aristocratic families and sects, this was actually considered a basic operation.
After all, they also needed to survive, especially when chaos was about to arrive. It was even more necessary to place bets separately. No one dared to say that the person they chose would definitely win. No matter how confident they were in their own judgment, they had to consider carefully. The price of placing all their bets was the extermination of their family. Just like the period of the 3 kingdoms, the Wei, Shu and Wu kingdoms all had Zhuge family members. Even if one did not know much about the 3 kingdoms and only knew of Zhuge Liang, but after careful calculation, the Zhuge family in Wei and Wu kingdoms actually had many people who were officials. Some of them even had extremely high statuses. And the Zhuge family was just a microcosm of the aristocratic families of the 3 kingdoms. And these aristocratic families and sects disciples who came to the northern frontier might not be comparable to Zhuge Liang or Sima Yi, but their abilities were not inferior in the slightest. Since they had decided to place their bets on the northern frontier, they would not allow some defective goods to ruin their reputation. Therefore, some people said that they could not live under the same sky as the northern frontier, but it was possible that some of the mainstays of the northern frontier were sent by them. Regarding this, everyone, including Lin Yuan, was well aware of it. The northern frontier could be said to be the enemy of the entire world, and Lin Yuan's series of actions had not only allowed the northern frontier to live in such a situation, but even vaguely had the potential to dominate the Qianwu continent. But the most important thing was, they could not stop. Once the northern frontier stopped moving, it would definitely not be a situation where everyone would be fine. To put it bluntly, who knew how many powers were waiting for the northern frontier to fall? Once the northern frontier fell, they would immediately pounce like jackals and wolves, devouring the remains of the northern frontier. Ah! Lin Yuan also chuckled as he looked at Yin Hong with a calm gaze. His expression was somewhat playful. But he did not immediately open his mouth to speak, causing many people to be on tenterhooks. Some were worried, some were excited. All kinds of emotions were displayed vividly at this moment. Chapter 1156. Looks like you're very confident in your own strength. Lin Yuan's lips curled into a grin as he looked at Yin Hong with a gloomy gaze. Almost at the same time, Yin Hong and Yu Zhong's expressions changed. Although Lin Yuan didn't remove the fig leaf, his attitude was very obvious. You, Yin Hong, are confident in your own strength? Are you saying that I, Lin Yuan, am a pushover? Lin Yuan stared at Yin Hong with scorching eyes and said coldly, "This king's attitude has always been clear. I don't care who you are, who's behind you, whether you came to the northern frontier to join in the fun or deliberately came to the northern frontier to cause trouble. But since you're here, this king must make you pay the price. Otherwise, if outsiders find out, wouldn't they think that the northern frontier can do whatever they want?" As soon as he said that, some people with ulterior motives immediately shrunk their necks. They had already made up their minds. If the northern frontier was only strong on the outside but weak on the inside, after Yu Zhong and Yin Hong left, they would find an excuse to cause trouble at the northern frontier. Moreover, when the Black Jiao really got angry and they did this, could it be that the Black Jiao would really fight to the death with them? As if they were pushovers. But now the Black Jiao had made his attitude clear. If they came to the northern frontier to cause trouble, they would have to pay the price. Rather than saying these words for Yin Hong and Yu Zhong, it was better to say that they were for the people with ulterior motives. Just like how some people always like to ride on popularity and traffic without any bottom line, if they ruthlessly stepped on the northern frontier, then the benefits for what they were going to do next could be said to be obvious with the naked eye. The most important thing was breaking the Black Jiao's invincibility. Invincibility was a mysterious thing, but when faced with it, not many people dared to say that they didn't care. It was like an ordinary person.
If you asked him to start a business from scratch with Jack Ma, although the conditions were the same, the ordinary person would still have a certain amount of fear and worry in his heart.
After all, Jack Ma's achievements and family business were there for all to see. Although it was said that even a pig could fly in the wind, reality had proven that a pig really couldn't stand in the wind. Instead, when it left the scene, it was already seen by countless butchers as a piece of fat meat under their butcher's knife. Ever since Lin Yuan had been born, it could be said that he had won every battle. Among them, there were ants who were so weak that they didn't even bother to remember their names. But there were also fierce people who made them feel fear. If they were in his shoes, even if they didn't go to the extent of turning pale at the mention of a flood dragon, who could guarantee that they would always be able to maintain a calm state and convince themselves that they would definitely win? Invincible momentum. This was a sharp blade that Lin Yuan had hung over the heads of all the natives of the sky martial world. Furthermore, as time passed, this sharp blade seemed to be getting sharper and sharper. In normal times, of course, they could ignore this sharp blade, because normally, they wouldn't have a conflict with the northern frontier. Even if there were some small conflicts, it would be between the people below them and the northern frontier. Like the southern wasteland's venerable monster, who had almost shed all pretenses of cordiality with Lin Yuan, also didn't run over to the northern frontier to start a massacre, right? Because in the world of cultivation, the outcome of a battle didn't decide anything. The only thing that could decide victory and defeat was the silent contest between the strongest of the two sides. Otherwise, even if you destroyed the other side's country in one battle, the other side's strongest would madly slaughter your subordinates. In a short period of time, the advantage that you had painstakingly built up would be completely destroyed. Therefore, not everyone was an idiot who didn't know that the northern frontier was too powerful and needed to be targeted. Instead, there wasn't a single power that dared to say that they could fight against the northern frontier alone. Even if they pulled in a few strong reinforcements, they might not necessarily be able to win. Just like what Yin Hong said, even if they won, they would have to recuperate for more than 10 years. At that time, they wouldn't even be able to eat the meat, and would instead become a piece of fat meat in the eyes of others. But what if they were able to pull in reinforcements until they could win against the northern frontier? The distribution of benefits seemed to be somewhat uneven. In the world of adults, there were no fairy tales. Only benefits were the eternal and unchanging theme. If you pulled in a large group of people to fight against the northern frontier, you might not necessarily be able to win. Then why couldn't the other side directly join forces with the northern frontier to eat you up? In the face of enough benefits, human nature was as fragile as a bubble that could be easily popped. Just like in the spring and autumn period and the warring states period, the 6 states joined forces to attack the Qin dynasty. It seemed to be a great show of force, and they forced the great Qin dynasty into a desperate situation. However, in the end, because of the uneven distribution of benefits, they parted on bad terms. As a result, the alliance became a joke. The Qin dynasty, which was forced into a desperate situation, became the ruler of the world from the Qin clan, which couldn't even be considered the Qin dynasty, and the first emperor appeared. In every chaotic era, it could be said that there were many talented people. Whether it was generals or strategists, just randomly picking out a famous one, almost all of them had the foresight of the era. Some of the ancient systems were still used in Lin Yuan's era. Were these people fools? Couldn't they see the principles behind it? No, they could see it, but they still wanted to fight for their own or their own country's benefits. They didn't even hesitate to draw their swords against their allies. The current northern frontier was just like the Qin dynasty. It clearly had the power to surpass any dynasty, but if it followed the planned strategy of the northern frontier, it would instantly go from being the most threatening existence to being the least threatening existence. More importantly, now, no dynasty was willing to go head-to-head with the northern frontier, because they would pay a price that they couldn't bear. Instead, it would let the other dynasties take advantage of it. As long as the northern frontier could maintain its strength, no power would dare to start a war with the northern frontier. Yin Hong and Yu Jiang looked at each other. Then, Yin Hong suddenly raised the sky piercer in his hand. Just as he was about to activate his divine power, he suddenly paused and looked in the direction of Kagura in shock. This was because he suddenly realized that there was an existence in the northern frontier that overlapped with his priesthood. He was the star sovereign of the 5 grains of the Dou tribe, also known as the god of the 5 grains. He was in charge of the growth of the grains. If he was determined to make the northern frontier pay the price, then the northern frontier would fall into a famine for a long time. When that time came, there would be no way to feed the people of the northern frontier, let alone expand outward. However, when he used his priesthood, he clearly felt a wave of helplessness.
It was obvious that the priesthood in charge of the growth of grains had been taken by someone in the northern frontier.
Some people in the Eldritch world said that the god of the 5 grains was the Yen Emperor, and Yin Hong didn't deny this. However, the two were not of the same system. No matter how capable the Yen Emperor was, he couldn't interfere with the governance of the heavenly court. Moreover, he couldn't play such tricks in the northern frontier under the nose of Kagura. Chapter 1157. Yin Hong's expression changed several times, but his reaction was extremely fast. He held the halberd with both hands and pressed it down. A terrifying power suddenly leaked out, and the world turned from bright to dark. It was as if this halberd smashing down would cause the world to collapse. Rumble! 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 Continuous tremors spread from where Yin Hong's halberd landed in all directions. Even more than 100,000 kilometers away, this thunder-like tremor could be faintly heard. Hear me. Lin Yuan's eyes widened as he suddenly roared. The pillar-like torrential rain and the puddles on the ground all rose out of thin air, forming a huge transparent hand in an instant and slamming toward the halberd. The two incomparably terrifying forces collided with each other, immediately causing countless spectators to tremble with fear. Because the halberd was actually unable to withstand such a terrifying force and broke apart at the first collision. That translucent hand was also completely scattered into splashes of water at this moment. However, everyone knew that no matter if it was the flying halberd fragments or the falling water, they all contained an unimaginable amount of divine force. They were far from being able to contend against an existence that was far from being able to contend against. Even the slightest bit of contact would be a path to death. Watching powerful beings fight had always been a convention in the cultivation world since ancient times. Of course, this wasn't because most cultivators had nothing to do and liked to go out and watch people fight. Instead, it was because watching powerful beings fight could often be used to comprehend things by analogy. It was beneficial to one's cultivation and state of mind. However, when it came to watching a battle, one had to know their own limits. When mortal evolution states fought, even mortals could watch. When airborne realm cultivators fought, mortals would be shocked to death even if they got close enough to hear the sounds of the two sides clashing, let alone just watching. In the northern frontier king's mansion, Li Zhong put his hands behind his back and looked at Lin Yuan and Yin Hong who had begun to fight. He said in a deep voice, "A great disaster is imminent. Don't bother to hide your strength. Activate the city protection formation immediately." As soon as his voice fell, the guards of the king's mansion immediately obeyed the order. Soon, a layer of golden light shrouded Shunning City. Those halberd pieces and water streams only caused some ripples when they hit this layer of golden light. In addition, Lin Yuan was already able to eliminate the impact when he made his move. He tried his best to avoid the collision points that would hurt Shunning City. Therefore, the attacks weren't too dense. With the city protection formation newly developed by the Ministry of Works, it could barely withstand the attacks. Lin Yuan looked back at the activated Great City Barrier Array, and his heart was slightly at ease. He could also eliminate the impact of the aftermath of the battle on Shunning City, but he didn't do so before. Even if he didn't like Yin Hong's character, he had to admit that Yin Hong did have some skills. If he were to fight him head-on, he might not be able to win. If he were to multitask at this time and care about the people of the northern frontier living in Shunning City, then it would be hard to say who would win. More importantly, whether it was Yin Hong or Yu Jiang, they were not good people. If they thought that he would care about the lives of the people of the northern frontier, they would never hesitate. They might even put down their dignity as cultivators and attack the mortals, forcing Lin Yuan to save them. Then, they would severely injure Lin Yuan. In the untainted world, good people couldn't survive, especially Yin Hong, who had a bad reputation and could even betray his own father for power. In addition, there was another person who could betray the human tribe and cultivate the Western religious sect in order to go further. If Lin Yuan didn't question their character, then Lin Yuan should question his own character. Yin Hong threw away the broken sky halberd and said with a sneer, "Lord Dragon King, you are so cold-hearted. You don't care about the people of Shunning City behind you. It turns out that your previous performance was just a disguise." Lin Yuan didn't move and said with a sneer, "No wonder your father would rather choose Wuging, who is not talented, then pass the throne to you or your brother. You don't have a discerning eye. I didn't manage Shunning City. Did you cause any damage to Shunning City? Can you scare the people in the city to death? You. Yin Hong's face twitched slightly and his eyes became bloodshot. At first glance, they looked like a pair of scarlet eyes. When Lin Yuan called him His Highness Qian Sui before, he only took it as an ordinary insult.
Although the lifespan of a cultivator is generally not short, only a very small number of people who hide in their homes and cultivate on their own land can live to the end of their lives.
Moreover, they must be very lucky and never encounter outsiders who come to find trouble. Most of the cultivators either die in the hands of other cultivators or under the claws and teeth of demon beasts. Even in the untainted world, similar things can be said to be everywhere. Therefore, even though he was angry when he was called short-lived, it was not too outrageous. In a sense, it was not wrong. Although Yin Hong was still alive, he was actually a spirit on the list of deification, which was similar to the existence of demons and monsters. It was just that his name sounded a little better. Not to mention that he was 1,000 years old, he was taken away by the Clan of Enlightenment to learn martial arts at the age of 12 or 13. Not long after he finished his martial arts and went down the mountain, he was persuaded by Shen Gongbao and finally died in the Tai Chi diagram. His muscles, bones, blood, and flesh turned into ashes. It was true that he was short-lived. But Lin Yuan's words really poked at his sore spot. He never understood why his father chose Wugang, the worst of the three brothers. Both he and his elder brother were the sons of the king of Jiang and had the Jiang family behind them. They had help from both the government and the ordinary people. Moreover, he and his elder brother had never been idle or fighting. Instead, they had been studying all kinds of knowledge seriously. Until his death, he still couldn't figure out how they were inferior to Wugang. In Yin Hong's opinion, Wugang was a complete loser. After the Zhou dynasty destroyed the Shang dynasty, they still couldn't win the hearts of the remaining people of the Shang dynasty. And because DXIN burned all the provisions, GFA couldn't move an inch. In the end, he had no choice but to make Wugang a duke and order him to manage the old land of the Shang dynasty and the remaining people of the Shang dynasty. But in fact, GFA was just helpless. If he was so generous, he wouldn't have made Uncle Guan, Uncle Kai, and Uncle Hua build vassal states from the east, west, and north to monitor Wugang together. Based on the situation of the Zhou dynasty at that time, it was simply impossible for them to bear another huge war. If Wu Gang was a wise lord, there would probably be no such thing as the Duke of Zhou's nourishment and the world's loyalty. It could be said that before DXIN died, he had even checkmated GFA. In the end, Wu Gang held a good hand and forcefully smashed it into pieces. Chapter 1158. In terms of results, DXIN should have lost. However, in a practical sense, DXIN was the biggest winner. This was because he almost single-handedly overthrew the theory of the right of kings and tried to get rid of Hongjuan's influence to establish humanity. DXIN did not burn himself to death at Zhai Xinglu. He also burned the wealth that Yin Shang had accumulated over hundreds of years. This made GFA and Jiangxia, who originally dreamed of eating Zhaoga and eventually swallowing all the vassals in the world, so angry that they almost cried. Not only did they not dare to continue killing the remnants of Yin Shang and Crown Prince Wugang, they even gave Wugang territory and population, begging Wugang not to be stubborn and attack them. This was because the Zhou dynasty had no more money and food at that time. They could not afford to continue the war. If they continued to fight, no one would benefit. They would only be eaten by the other vassals. This was also why Lin Yuan admired DXIN the most. He used his own death to give GFA and the heavenly Tao that GFA represented the most fatal blow. He protected the people of Yin Shang and his own bloodline. Be it as a king or a father, he was outstanding. Even the people of Zhou dynasty who were used to beautifying themselves did not talk about this matter. This was because, logically speaking, they could not justify themselves at all. One could say that GFA was noble and had the heart of a saint. Therefore, he only killed the tyrant DXIN and did not offend Crown Prince Wugang and the remnants of Yin Shang. However, how could one explain that GFA consecutively ordered 3 of his brothers to spy on Wugang near his territory? These 3 brothers were not small characters. Whether it was money, land, or troops, they were all of high standards. In the 4th year after the fall of Yin Shang, GFA suddenly died. His 13-year-old son, Zhou Chengwang, ascended the throne. Then, his three brothers who were spying on Wugang directly joined forces with Wugang and caused the rebellion of the three eunuchs. They almost destroyed the Zhou dynasty. At the same time, Xian's move also shattered GFA's dream of becoming an emperor. This was because he could not allow a person controlled by Hongjun to become the ancestor of the human Tao. That would be blasphemy to the human race and irresponsible to his descendants. Therefore, destroying the star-picking tower was also an important factor in shattering GFA's dreams of becoming an emperor. With the help of the Ren sect and the Chan sect, GFA could have swept away all the vassals. However, due to Xian's counterattack, he had to call a truce. Not only did he let go of Wugang and the remnants of the Shang dynasty, but he also had to divide the territories he had snatched to the other vassals. Even he only had the rights of rights, music, and conquest. He was still one of the vassals, but he had only overthrown his superior. Therefore, he did not dare to call himself an emperor, nor could he call himself an emperor because he did not deserve it. Xian's death had also planted a seed in the hearts of the Zhou dynasty's vassals. That was, divine authority was not unshakable. So what if GFA has Hongjun, Ren school, and Chan school behind him? With the mountains and rivers of the Shang dynasty and the fate of the Shang dynasty, the heavenly Tao could not touch the human supremacy. Without the existence of traitors like Weizi, Baigan, and Yin Hong, even if GFA and Jiangxia starved to death outside Zhaoga City, it would not affect Xian to be the human king. The marquises and kings of the Zhou dynasty did not see how supreme the heavenly Tao was. They did not see how the immortals moved mountains and filled the seas. They saw how Xian fought against the heavenly Tao and the immortals with his mortal body. He could even turn his hand into clouds and rain. What they saw was the terror and methods of the supreme human being. The Zhou dynasty indeed had a history of nearly 800 years. However, it was inhumane because all the Zhou dynasty's vassals were constantly infecting their territories. Although those vassals were vassals of the Zhou dynasty in name, they had actually become a country within a country. They did not even bother to listen to the orders of the Zhou dynasty. During GFA's era, the Zhou dynasty's territory was still large. Even if the rebellion of the three eunuchs broke out, the Zhou dynasty had enough power to quell the rebellion. However, after 800 years, did the Zhou dynasty still have any territory to infect? When those spring and autumn overlords were fighting for the world, the Zhou dynasty was not yet extinct. Moreover, it could be counted as a national throne. After the end of the spring and autumn warring states period, the Qin dynasty completed the unification of the land. The Han dynasty completed the unification of the mind. No matter how bad the later dynasties were, no matter how muddle-headed the kings were, they could be said to be second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people. Moreover, once the situation of the vassals seizing territories appeared, they would not continue the national throne. It was only when the spring and autumn warring states period could no longer be infected that a chaotic era like the spring and autumn warring states period broke out. If Hongjun was said to be a strange man who suppressed the three Taos of heaven, earth, and man by himself. In that case, Xian was a king who was not inferior to Hongjun in the slightest. In fact, he was even superior to Hongjun. Wu Geng had a good hand that his father had left for him. No matter how he played, he would not be defeated and killed. Even if he had to die, he could directly drag GFA and the Zhou royal family to perish together. Others might even think highly of him. In the end, a rebellion of the three eunuchs broke out. It was a strong start but weak finish. It made Zhou Gongdan, a powerful minister, leave a good name in history. It was a model for the future ministers who tried to overthrow the emperor to learn from. Especially Yin Hong and Yin Zhao, who had already been conferred as gods, when they saw Wu Geng's performance in the heavenly court. They were so angry that they wanted to tear Wu Geng apart. They really couldn't understand why their father, who was obviously a man with outstanding foresight and deep schemes, would fail so badly in choosing an heir. He didn't choose between the two outstanding sons, and insisted on choosing the most useless one. However, even though that was the case, Yin Hong and Yin Zhao had already known that their father's actions back then were to oppose Hongjun. When choosing a successor, he would rather choose a mediocre emperor than choose Yin Hong and Yin Zhao, who were nurtured by the Jiang clan. Because choosing them to succeed the throne was equivalent to Xian personally burning his years of hard work. However, when Lin Yuan said these words, it still made Yin Hong's heart surge with uncontrollable killing intent. This bastard, he deserves to die. Yin Hong suddenly clenched his fists. The blood in his body surged. He stared at Lin Yuan with a gloomy gaze. In the next moment, he suddenly punched out. The world that had just returned to normal darkened again. Even the thunderclouds above his head were scattered by the blood and fist intent. However, the sky was still pitch black. It was as if all the light had been absorbed into this punch. Immediately after, an indomitable and fierce fist radiance shone, as if it was going to break this dark world. Chapter 1159. In Shunning City. Li Zhong's expression changed abruptly.
He flew up into the sky and roared, "Fellow cultivators in the city, please lend me a hand.
If this punch really hits, even if it's just the aftershock, the city defense array of Shunning City will not be able to withstand it. If the city is destroyed, we can't escape death." By the time he finished speaking, Li Zhong had already activated his Gang Qi and constructed a new layer of light screen under the light screen formed by the Great City Barrier Formation. Then, the guards and officials of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion followed closely behind. They activated their Gang Qi and Genuine Qi, adding colorful colors to this layer of light curtain built by cultivators. In addition to the Prince's mansion of the Northern Frontier, members of the Demon Emperor Association, the Embroidered Gown Guards, the Northern Frontier Academy, and other government offices affiliated with the Northern Frontier also flew into the air, adding a bit more thickness to this layer of light curtain. Then came the rogue cultivators, well-known families, and even cultivators passing by the Northern Frontier. At the critical moment of life and death, they had no choice but to work together. The fist print arrived with a roar. Lin Yuan's face didn't change. The next moment, the endless rainstorm formed many phantoms between him and Yin Hong. Their original appearances couldn't be seen, but they could feel that even if they were phantoms, they still had extremely powerful power. Almost at the moment when they appeared, the world was shrouded in all kinds of ferocious and domineering qi. Even the defender formation and the defense built by cultivators seemed to be of no help. Most of the ordinary people in Shunning City who couldn't intervene still felt their breathing stagnant, as if there was a layer of mountain on their backs. If Lin Yuan didn't rescue Shunning City before because he believed that Shunning City could protect itself, then at this moment, Lin Yuan's sudden outburst directly hammered the fact that Lin Yuan didn't care about the life and death of Shunning City at all. In fact, this was indeed the case. Lin Yuan boasted that he was not a good person, let alone a Virgin Mary. When he had the ability, he didn't mind turning the Northern Frontier into a fair and just place, allowing those who were depressed in other places to develop their ambitions in the Northern Frontier. He would also change the policies so that the ordinary people in the Northern Frontier could live a good life with enough to eat and warm clothes, be well off, and even have the ability to let their own bloodline advance towards the world of cultivation. But when one's ability was insufficient, what righteousness? What reputation? What persona? Everything can be discarded. There were always people who liked to talk about Lin Yuan's identity as a demon beast. Even though Lin Yuan had made reforms time and time again, allowing those who were willing to trade their hands for a better life in the Northern Frontier to live a better life, there were also people who slandered him, saying that Lin Yuan was just a demon beast. How could he have a heart of compassion? Then they openly blamed everything that Lin Yuan had done on Li Zhong, the king of the Northern Frontier. Anyway, in their eyes, the only thing worth worrying about in the Northern Frontier was Lin Yuan. No matter how good Li Zhong's reputation was, he was just a puppet in Lin Yuan's hands. If they were the ones to blame Lin Yuan, they could also make Li Zhong a good puppet. But even these people didn't know that when it came to personal safety, Lin Yuan's actions were even crueler and more heartless than the demon beasts they had previously claimed. Shunning City was conquered? Rebuilt? People in the Northern Frontier were all dead? Again. But to take Lin Yuan's life? Sorry, before he returned to the world where he had lived in his previous life and took revenge with his own hands, he couldn't swallow this anger. The fist whistled through the air and shattered the phantoms of the fiend gods. A large amount of water splashed onto the Grand Barrier Array. In an instant, ripples appeared on the Grand Barrier Array. After that, the light barrier formed by the Grand Barrier Array dimmed down. It seemed that it wouldn't be long before it collapsed completely. The rumbling sounds were incessant. With a continuous bombardment of the Great Defensive Formation, the residents of Shunning City, who were already having difficulty breathing, suddenly spat out mouthfuls of blood. Some elderly people simply couldn't bear such pressure and died on the spot. Among them, there were many young children and weak people who were sick. Hong, today you killed my people in the northern frontier. In the future, this king will reward you handsomely. Lin Yuan's eyes trembled slightly, and he said in a cold voice, when this king comes to the untainted land, I will go to the heavenly court to find the list of deification. I will erase your name, scatter your soul, and let you disappear in the river of time. Even if the chaos is reborn and all things are reborn, this king will find you again and kill you hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of times until your origin is completely obliterated. The golden crown on Hong's head had been completely shattered, but his black hair was raised upwards, like a great demon roaring in the world. He grinned at Lin Yuan and sneered, that's only if you have the life to live until that day, you bastard. The phantoms of gods and demons were smashed one after another. When the fist print arrived in front of Lin Yuan, it was still as strong as before, as if it had infinite power and would not stop until it completely smashed Lin Yuan. Many of the dissipating fists also smashed onto the defensive formation of Shunning City. Finally, the defensive formation, which was already overwhelmed by the fists, couldn't hold on any longer. With a series of cracking noises, the defensive formation completely collapsed. The rest of the fist light smashed on the defense formed by the cultivators. Suddenly, countless cultivators in the airborne realm and the heavenly gang realm were sent flying by the terrifying power. Screams of pain could be heard everywhere. However, at this moment, no one would investigate in detail. No one knew how many people had died under this punch. Even the cultivators who were lucky enough to survive lay in the ruins without making a sound. It was obvious that they couldn't even get up. Because under such a situation, there was no point in playing dead at all. So what if they could play it well? When the fist light fell, as long as they were within the attack range, they would be directly smashed into meat paste. As long as they still had the strength to fight, they would definitely go up and continue to strengthen this layer of defense. Li Zhong, who was in the lead, opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was frighteningly pale. Li Xian stood in the air not far away from Li Zhong. The aura on his body was even more dispirited. He was actually beaten down by this punch. Seeing this, Li Zhong also sighed slightly. Li Xian had been blessed by the heavens ever since he came to the northern frontier. Since he was also an official of the northern frontier, he had been blessed by the luck of the northern frontier. Coupled with his own talent, he was not weak at all. In a short time, he directly rushed to the 6th level of the Void Realm. Such a cultivation advancement was not only in other places, but also in the northern frontier, where cultivation was generally not low. However, this time, Li Xian was beaten down by more than one level. Li Xian's cultivation was still at the 2nd level of the Void Realm, which was considered to be his solid foundation. Moreover, since this punch had caused his cultivation to fall, it had definitely injured his foundation as well. If he didn't recuperate for a few years, not to mention improving his cultivation might even continue to regress, and he might even become a complete cripple. Chapter 1160. Surge of Wind and Thunder. When the fist seal was almost in front of Lin Yuan roared furiously. The lightning armor attached to his flood dragon roared out at this moment and turned into a lifelike lightning dragon. It crashed into the fist seal in front of him. Almost instantly, the lightning dragon was smashed into pieces by the fist seal. However, the fist seal was also at the end of its flight. When the lightning dragon was completely torn apart, the fist seal was already so blurry that it could not be seen clearly. When it landed on Lin Yuan's body, the damage it caused was not worth mentioning. It only pushed Lin Yuan back 3 meters. It no longer had the violent aura that wanted to tear Lin Yuan apart. This! Hong's eyes narrowed as he looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. For a moment, he seemed to have lost the ability to speak. That fist! That was the fist intent his father had left for him. It was also the only thing his father had left for him. He had studied it for countless years, but he could not even comprehend a trace of its true meaning. More importantly, that fist contained the human king's aura that belonged only to Xian. That was Xian's will that pressed forward courageously, ferociously, and firmly believed that man can conquer the heavens. That was the human king's will that surpassed the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, or even surpassed them. He had broken the aristocratic class and the theory of divine authority. He would rather destroy his country to protect the land of Yan Huang and not let the other races touch it. He had spent his entire life to make man stand above all things. He did not hesitate to fight against Qi refinement cultivators, immortals, and primordial creatures. He had fought until his country was destroyed and his family abandoned him. After that, he still wanted to deal a fatal blow to the puppet emperor supported by Hong Jun. How could this be possible? The fist aura could be broken. With a certain level of cultivation, it could be easily done. However, when the human king's will was imprinted, even a saint would have to temporarily avoid it. The fact that this Black Jiao could withstand the human king's will could only mean that the Black Jiao also possessed the human king's will or something similar. You're done attacking. Now it's my turn. Lin Yuan raised his head and hissed as his blue-white eyes flashed with cold killing intent. Retreat quickly. However, Yin Hong's expression changed. He shouted and pushed Yu Zhong forward with a flip of his hand while he retreated explosively. At this point, so what if he hated Lin Yuan to the core? The other party could even withstand the will of a human king. He was not in existence on the same level as him. If he continued to fight with Lin Yuan, he would only be asking for humiliation. How could he give up his life here? Yu Zhong was still trying to figure out Yin Hong's punch, so he didn't come back to his senses. By the time the words retreat quickly woke him up, he had already been pushed back more than 30 meters by Yin Hong. When he looked up, he saw the 4 immortal exterminating swords coming at him. Bastard, Ruan dares to harm me. Yu Zhong's face turned cold. He opened his mouth and roared. Xian was actually a descendant of the Yellow Emperor. However, compared to the other descendants of the Yellow Emperor, his seniority was much lower. Moreover, Yin Hong called himself Xian, and not Xian. His seniority was even lower, so it wasn't a problem for him to call Yu Zhong ancestor. However, at the critical moment, this descendant of his actually pushed him out to block the attack without hesitation. This was something that even a bastard wouldn't do. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. Was the words retreat quickly a warning? No, it was because Yin Hong saw that he was trying to figure out Xian's fist intent and deliberately roared. Firstly, it was to interrupt his comprehension. Secondly, it was because he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to react to Lin Yuan's attack and would be killed, unable to buy enough time for him to escape. However, at this moment, Yu Zhong had already been driven to this point. If he still wanted to escape, he would completely treat Lin Yuan as a decoration. He could only roar and brace himself to collide with the afterimages of the 4 immortal exterminating swords. In fact, if he was at his peak, Yu Zhong wouldn't have been able to deal with these 4 afterimages cut from the long river of time. However, he wasn't at his peak at all. He had stayed in the Tianwu world for a long time. Although it wasn't that he didn't receive the power of incense, it was still completely unable to make ends meet. If that wasn't the case, why would he run to the northern frontier to provoke the Black Jiao? Wasn't it just to spread the orthodoxy? In the end, he didn't take advantage of the situation. He even fought a big battle with Batu and Kagura. The injuries he suffered weren't worth mentioning, but the consumption of his divine power couldn't be ignored. The power he could erupt with at this moment was not much stronger than that of the natives of the Tianwu world. At this moment, facing this illusory version of the immortal exterminating sword formation, he learned from the mistakes of Bu Xingzhou. At the same time, the group of primitive desolate realm experts who were secretly watching the battle looked at each other in dismay. Although they disdained Yu Zhong and Yin Hong's character, in any case, they were all from the primitive desolate realm. After interacting with each other for so many years, they more or less had some friendship. At this moment, when they saw Yu Zhong about to die, they couldn't help but feel a little sad. A primitive desolate realm expert crossed space and entered Hanba's secluded cultivation place. He said in a deep voice, "Senior Hanba, although you and the Black Jiao were somewhat filthy before, it was only a misunderstanding. Later on, you also pointed out a path for the northern frontier. It can be considered as mending the relationship between both sides. If you come forward to plead for mercy for Yu Zhong, I think the Black Jiao will at least give you face, right? Why don't you? He deserves to die. Both of them deserve to die." Hanba's hoarse voice suddenly rang out, directly interrupting the primitive desolate realm expert's words. The primitive desolate realm expert's voice came to an abrupt halt. He shrunk his neck somewhat awkwardly. Yu Jiang and Yin Hong were of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline. Hanba was even the Yellow Emperor's daughter. In the war to unify Yan Huang, Hanba had also made great contributions to the Yellow Emperor. Although the ending wasn't good, she had left her name behind. Compared to Yu Jiang and Yin Hong, she was much stronger. When they interacted normally, Yu Jiang and Yin Hong also respectfully addressed Hanba as ancestor. However, at this moment, Hanba's response was deserve to die, when Yu Jiang was in trouble? If they were to fall into the Black Jiao's hands one day, Hanba would definitely ignore them even more. Hanba turned her head. Her long hair that was like withered grass covered her face. Her expression couldn't be seen clearly. However, her hoarse voice was filled with endless killing intent. She said coldly, "When I find out the whereabouts of Yin Hong, I will definitely kill this bastard with my own hands. I will not let this bastard tarnish the reputation of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline. And you bunch of clowns. Although your mouth sounds nice, do you really think that I don't know what you are planning?" When he spoke up to hear, boundless baleful aura and blood energy burst out from Hanba's body. His pair of deathly gray eyes seemed to turn as he stared at the primordial creature's head, and he said coldly, "If you continue to instigate my Yellow Emperor's bloodline to become enemies with the Black Flood Dragon, then I'll dig out your heart once more and see if you really have a heart of 7 orifices. Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's do it." Chapter 1161. Boom. The sword shadows of the 4 immortal slaying swords dispersed. Yu Jiang's broken body fell from the sword formation. Even his primordial spirit was swept away by the nether realm's black water. Seeing Yu Jiang being killed and Yin Hong fleeing, countless residents of Shunning City clapped their hands in joy. After all, in their eyes, although Lin Yuan was a bit cold-blooded, he was still protecting the northern frontier. Moreover, Lin Yuan was usually scolded as a barbaric demon. At this time, as long as Li Zhong stood out, they would believe that the northern frontier was protecting them. Lin Yuan's attitude was not important at all. Even if he did good things, these people would not appreciate it. All intelligent creatures had a common problem. They would only believe what they wanted to believe. For example, in the history of Lin Yuan's previous life, Wu Zetian had won 26 battles and had won 23 battles. There were still 2 battles left before the war started. At most she had lost 1 foreign battle. She had become the world's overlord, and all the countries had established Wu Zhou as the top of the world at that time. However, in the words of Tang and Song Rushing, Wu Zetian had lost 9 out of 10 battles, and the military prestige of the Tang Empire had been completely destroyed. After Li Longji ascended the throne, he pushed down Wu Zetian and crazily discredited Wu Zetian. He cancelled the system of Wu Zetian and wantonly appointed people from the Confucian sect and the aristocratic families. In the later years of Li Longji's reign, the Tang dynasty's territory seemed vast, but in reality, it had nothing to do with Li Longji. There were provincial governors everywhere. It was just like a country within a country. In a serious situation, Li Longji could not even mobilize the troops he could use. He was attacked to the capital and did not dare to fight with the rebel army. He directly abandoned the capital and fled. Such a retarded person was praised by the scholars of Tang and Song dynasty to be a hero of the Golden Age, an eternal emperor. From this, one could see how much wealth Wu Zetian had left behind for him. Then, why did Li Longji and the scholars of Tang and Song dynasty crazily discredit Wu Zetian and push the blame to Wu Zetian, claiming that Wu Zetian was a tyrant who only knew how to use her beauty to entertain people? The answer was very simple. Because they could not accept it. Whether it was Li Longji or the later emperors, whether it was the scholars of the Tang dynasty or the Song dynasty, none of them could accept the fact that a lowly woman had climbed over their heads and performed countless feats that they didn't even dare to imagine. Therefore, they would rather abandon this glorious history than truthfully record Wu Jiong as a famous ruler throughout the ages. In Lin Yuan's previous life, almost all historians, except for those scum who fish for fame and praise and pretend to know when they don't know to deceive the ignorant, knew that the history of the Tang and Song dynasties was just for fun. They would rather believe in the private notes circulating among the people with the evidence of unearthed cultural relics than directly believe in official history such as the comprehensive mirror for governance. It was the same in the northern frontier. These people would rather believe that all the benevolent policies in the northern frontier came from Li Zhong than believe that it was always Lin Yuan who treated them well. Although Lin Yuan added fuel to the fire behind the scenes, the reason why this idea could be so popular was that these people already had such a seed in their hearts. Those ambitious people, and Lin Yuan just fertilized this seed and watered it. How Lin Yuan did it? Why did it have anything to do with them? In short, they didn't believe it. At this moment, the third prince, who had been escorted into Shunning City by the imperial guards, was even more despondent. Looking at the dead and wounded Shunning City, looking at the cultivators who were still pale after surviving the disaster, and looking at the godlike figure in the sky, there was only one thought left in his mind. My father's brain was kicked by a donkey. After a quarter of an hour, in the prince's mansion in the northern frontier, Lin Yuan's body was coiled up. His blue-white vertical pupils looked at the pale-faced brothers Li Zhong and Li Xian, and he said in a deep voice, "Although Shunning City suffered a great loss in this battle, it can't be said that we didn't gain anything. At least after this battle, the demon venerable of the southern wasteland will tuck his tail between his legs, and the surrounding empires won't even dare to breathe loudly. In the short term, the northern frontier will have no worries. Therefore, in this king's opinion, we should kill the Frost Mirror Khan and occupy the Frost Mirror grassland. Let's start the plan as usual and not delay anymore." Li Zhong thought for a moment, then he cupped his hands toward Lin Yuan and said, "Yes, I will do it right away." Then, Lin Yuan's gaze fell on Li Xian as he said with a smile, "This drop in realm is your calamity, but it is also your opportunity. If you can cross this hurdle, your future achievements will be limitless. Even if you can't compare to your elder brother, you will definitely not be trapped in the void realm like a mediocre person and not be able to find the way for a lifetime." Yes. Li Xian's aura was still weak, but he still cupped his hands and replied in a deep voice. Lin Yuan gently swayed his dragon tail and said indifferently, "All right, I know you're feeling uncomfortable and can't take this lying down. Therefore, this king grants you an indefinite leave. You can go to Mount Shaohui or go to the academies of the other empires. This king will take care of everything for you. What do you think? When you come back, you'll be promoted from the commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guards to the governor of the Embroidered Uniform Guards. You'll be in complete control of the Embroidered Uniform Guards in the northern frontier. Those spies outside will also be under your command. What do you think?" Li Xian's breathing paused for a moment. This was using him as a knife. Yingtian Guan of Buxing continent had already been handed over to Yi Balan to deal with. The remaining Mount Shaohui Zen Monastery and the academies of the Confucian sect that had Song Shuebu's portraits hanging on their walls as offerings were all targets for Lin Yuan to take revenge on. And now, Lin Yuan had given him this task to show others just how ruthless the most ferocious mad dog on the northern frontier was. This was a warning to those forces that wanted to make an enemy out of the northern frontier. It was to let them think twice before making an enemy out of the northern frontier. If they didn't have the ability to overthrow the northern frontier, then when the northern frontier counterattacked, not to mention those who were related to them, even those who were friends with them would have to die. Whether this matter was done well or not, it would cause a lot of trouble. Countless years later, they would be scolded so badly that they wouldn't be able to raise their heads. Then could they not do it? That was fine. Later on, the Embroidered Uniform Guards would directly send a governor who dared to do this and directly suppress Li Xian until he couldn't breathe. Would you believe it? The northern frontier lacked everything now, but it didn't lack capable people. There were many people who were willing to be this mad dog. As for being scolded, would they be afraid of being scolded if they were already a mad dog? If they were really scolded, it would mean that they didn't kill enough, didn't punish enough, and didn't do enough. After taking a deep breath, Li Xian licked his lips and a sinister smile appeared on his pale face. He said in a cold voice, "By the decree of the Dragon King, during this holiday, this subordinate will definitely tell those forces that want to make an enemy out of the northern frontier what will happen to them if they fail to take action." Chapter 1162. 3 days later. The old land of the Shenwu dynasty, the Central Plains, near the imperial capital. Yi Bailin, with his clothes torn and his weapons stained with blood, was riding on a green wolf in the Wisdom State. He looked gloomily in the direction of the Yingtian Temple. Of the 2,000 Yi Bailin riders, less than 1,000 had come to report, and most of them were injured. Yingtian Guan's formation was located in every one of the 108 cities and towns. In order to remove these formation cores, Yi Buhuan's cavalry used all means possible to find out the location of the formation cores within 3 days. However, there were always mistakes in their actions. Ying Tianguan's people naturally had some quick-witted people who could see what these new refugees were plotting. Therefore, the battle to remove the formation cores did not go smoothly. Fortunately, it was still completed in the end. Bureau Chief, the Ying Tian Temple must have received the news. Even if we did it cleanly, the formation eyes can't be hidden. At the moment, the Ying Tian Temple should have gathered their disciples from all over the country. Maybe they have borrowed some masters from their friends. Can we really slaughter the Ying Tian Temple with just the few of us? One of Yi Bailin's riders rode his horse to Yi Bailin's side. With a simple and honest face, he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm not afraid of death. I'm just worried that if we don't complete the task given by the Dragon King, those little bastards of the genie guards will step on us." Yi Bailin silently wiped the blood off his saber and said slowly, "Who told you that I expect you to slaughter the Ying Tian Temple?" But Yi Bailin's rider was slightly startled and said with a simple face, "We only have so many brothers. Could it be that the bureau chief has asked for other reinforcements?" "No reinforcements, but we do have evil spirits." Yi Bailin raised his saber and pointed at the gate of the Ying Tian Temple. He said with a cold face, "There are some talismans buried outside the Ying Tian Temple to deter the sky demon. What we need to do later is to rush into the gate of the Ying Tian Temple and open the bamboo tubes I gave you before. Then we will pour out the things inside and dirty the talismans used to deter the sky demon. In addition, the things in the bamboo tubes can attract the sky demon. When the time comes, the sky demon will swarm in. Even if they have other means, it will be of no use. I am the one who will succeed in this. Even if I don't stop at night, I'm not afraid of death. It's all up to me." Fearless in the face of death, a group of unremitting night riders raised the sabers in their hands and roared in unison. More than 1,000 of them storming the gate of Ying Tian Temple was already a matter of life and death. At that time, if they took out the demon-attracting item, they would inevitably fall into a situation of being attacked from both front and rear. Therefore, Yi Bailin's words were tantamount to telling them that this trip would only end in death. But even if they were to drag Ying Tianguan down with them, none of the night uncollected cavalry had the slightest intention of retreating. Instead, they all raised their war blades and shouted out their battle cry. On the other side, the Frost Mirror Cavalry, who had been besieged by the northern frontier for more than 3 months, was now facing a huge crisis. The cavalry of the Shuangjian dynasty, except for the Blood Liao Knights and some tribal khans, was mainly composed of light cavalry. However, no matter how rich the Shuangjian dynasty was, they could only afford heavy cavalry with 3 horses at most. One was for riding, one was for storing equipment, and one was for maintaining sufficient physical strength at all times in case of a sudden battle. The light cavalry was even worse. Light cavalry basically only had 1 mount. Although the weight of their armor was not as exaggerated as that of heavy cavalry, they did not have mounts that could be changed. Therefore, they could only bring as few supplies as possible. A Frost Mirror Cavalry could only bring enough rations to last for 3 days at most. Normally, they mainly relied on raiding places and transporting supplies behind the main army. There had never been any major problems because when it came to cavalry, before the rise of the northern frontier, the Shuangjian dynasty was definitely the undisputed number 1. They had always been the ones robbing others. There had never been a situation where they were surrounded and attacked. However, when they encountered the northern frontier this time, they were clearly at a disadvantage. They encountered the even more terrifying northern frontier dragon cavalry, and were suppressed to the point where they could not breathe. When the Blood Liao Knights finally arrived, they were defeated by the enemy's feigned defeat and counterattack tactics. The remaining Frost Mirror Cavalry did not manage to escape either. When they turned around, they encountered the Black Water Army that was constantly encircling them. There was also the equally elite Night Cavalry. Those Night Cavalry were like evil spirits hiding in the grasslands. As long as they were targeted, there was no way to get rid of them. Sooner or later, they would be completely devoured by them or the Black Water Army that came to support them. Right now, the Shuangjian dynasty's main army was restricted to the northern frontiers area near the Great Wall. Even though the northern frontier army did not attack, they knew that the northern frontier army would not let them off so easily. At the very least, they would take a layer of skin off them. The Frost Mirror tribes had run out of dry rations, and the supplies that were intercepted along with the main army had been eaten as well. The Frost Mirror tribes had completely lost their composure as an alliance army. When they ran out of food, they did not hesitate to attack their comrades from other tribes and steal as much food as they could so that they could live longer. They would only have a chance to live if they could survive until the Northern Alliance decided to put them on trial. At this point, they could no longer steal rations. However, the Frost Mirror tribes were still fighting and killing each other. At first, Frost Mirror Khan thought that they were just venting their negative emotions. But later, he noticed that the bodies of the Frost Mirror tribe's warriors would be taken away by both sides. Once, when he went out for an inspection to boost morale, he noticed that some tribes were still drinking meat soup. Although they were not in good spirits, they were still able to survive. However, when someone handed him a bowl of meat soup, he realized that they had run out of food. Even their mounts had been eaten. This meat soup. Frost Mirror Khan felt his scalp go numb. When he came back to his senses, he was already back in his own camp.
He did not dare to observe the situation of the other Frost Mirror tribes.
Those were no longer human. They were a bunch of monsters in human skin. What was the Northern Frontier Army trying to do? Why did they treat them like this? They were going to die anyway. Why couldn't they just give them a quick death? Frost Mirror Khan held his head in pain and said with a sorrowful face, "I can't take it anymore. I can't live like this anymore. Men, go to the Northern Frontier Great Wall and announce that this king wants to see the Black Jiao. If the Black Jiao doesn't want to see him, then Li Zhong can. This king wants to ask them what they want to let us go." Chapter 1163. Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion. Conference Hall.
Li Zhong slowly put down the teacup in his hand and said with a mocking look, "Who has the time to meet them?"
I think this old dog is really shameless. He has been forced into such a desperate situation, but he is still hoping for a way out? If I were in such a situation, I would have killed myself to avoid being humiliated. What a shame. To be the emperor of a dynasty. You can't say that.
A middle-aged man in a cyan robe also put down the teacup in his hand and said with a faint smile, "The Shuangjin dynasty has been relying on their fast horses to look down on the demonic beasts in the Hengduan Mountains.
In their eyes, the Kumu dynasty and the Xinwu dynasty are like money bags. They can take as much as they want.
Anyway, these barbarians are used to fighting to support their fighting. The last thing they are afraid of is being stubborn. Therefore, although they are forced into a desperate situation now, when they return to the Frost Mirror grassland, they will most likely continue to plunder the northern frontier."
If Lin Yuan were here, he would definitely agree with the middle-aged man's words. After all, the nomadic people had always been like this. The Han dynasty destroyed the Xiongnu tribe. At the end of the Eastern Han dynasty, the Central Plains suffered a great loss due to the chaos of the feudal lords. However, the foreign tribes still dared to rebel and created the tragedy known as the Five Barbarians Rebellion. The Mongolian Yuan dynasty was almost destroyed by the Ming dynasty. The Golden family lost its prestige and the Ming dynasty was defeated by the Manchurian Qing.
For these nomadic people in the feudal period, you could either keep beating them until they could not raise their heads or wait for them to plunder a large amount of wealth, land, and population like the Tang and Song dynasties.
There was no possibility of peace between the two sides. Li Zhong laughed and did not respond to the middle-aged man's words. Instead, he said in a deep voice, "Master Wu, a straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. You and I both know why you came to the northern frontier this time. As for how to deal with the Shuangjian dynasty, my Dragon King will make the decision. Master Wu has no right to criticize me." Master Wu pondered for a moment, then shook his head gently and said, "I am just stating the facts.
Besides, since the king of the northern frontier knows what I am here for, you should know that there is nothing more worthwhile for the northern frontier than cooperating with us, right?"
That may be the case, but the problem is that Master Wu should know that the northern frontier clans have their own rules. Whether it is Dragon King, me, or the northern frontier clans, none of us will allow anyone to break the rules. Li Zhong shook his head and smiled. The Dragon King has his own decision regarding the Frost Mirror Prairie. Master Wu, you came here for nothing. Master Wu was not a clan master from the Xinwu dynasty or a tribal Khan from the prairie. Following the demise of the Xinwu dynasty, some powers that had been suppressed by the Xinwu dynasty came out from the shadows and formed a new power. They wanted to use trade to buy the prairie and become a new dynasty to maintain the structure of the 7 dynasties. However, this idea was clearly wishful thinking. Not to mention whether Lin Yuan would agree to this kind of thing.
Just the aristocratic families of the northern region would not allow outsiders to snatch food from their bowls. Everyone in the northern region knew that the Frost Mirror grassland existed in name only. This also meant that if Lin Yuan did not make any other arrangements, all the products of the Frost Mirror grassland would be merged into the Chamber of Commerce of the northern region. In the eyes of those aristocratic families, it was another huge sum of money flowing into their pockets. At this time, Lin Yuan could keep the Frost Mirror grassland, but he could never hand it over to other forces. I think you should reconsider because we've come with sincerity. First of all, the clans in the north are all clans from the Shenwu dynasty. Their combined strength is far from what they used to be at their peak. This also means that even if these clans work together, they're just ants that can be destroyed with a flick of the finger in the north. It's the same for the north and the other forces. Therefore, these clans definitely won't be able to take a piece of meat like the Frost Mirror Prairie. If you want to support a puppet regime in the northern frontier, it will be impossible to succeed. Even if you do support a puppet regime, in the eyes of the other dynasties, you will be destroying the structure of the 7 dynasties. When the time comes, the Deadwood dynasty will definitely attack this puppet regime and even swallow the Frost Mirror Prairie that you fought so hard to conquer. Think about it. Are you willing to let the Deadwood dynasty take advantage of the land that the men of the northern frontier fought for? That's obviously not realistic. Therefore, once the Deadwood dynasty makes a move, the northern frontier will definitely be locked in a long war with the Deadwood dynasty. This is definitely not a good situation for the development of the northern frontier. The patriarch of the Wu family sucked in a deep breath and patted his chest. He smiled, but if you give the Frost Mirror Plains to us, you won't have to worry about that at all. With our strength, we might not be able to take on the Witheredwood Empire, but we can keep them busy for quite some time even without the support of the North. During that time, the North will be able to devour the Azure River Empire or the Chuyun Empire. At that time, the North won't even need to send troops. All we need to do is express our support, and the Witheredwood Empire will give up on attacking us. Family head Wu's voice was very tempting. Thinking about it from what he said, it was indeed a very tempting suggestion. A group of forces that did not belong to the northern frontier had taken over the Frost Mirror Prairie. No matter what the outside world thought, the Deadwood dynasty would definitely not let go of this great opportunity to swallow the Frost Mirror Prairie. At that time, the two sides would definitely be locked in a tug of war. If nothing unexpected happened, the Deadwood dynasty would definitely have the upper hand. At that time, the new force that had taken over the Frost Mirror Prairie would have to rely on the northern frontier to barely survive. More importantly, the appearance of this new force would form a flesh barrier that would stop the most troublesome Deadwood dynasty for the northern frontier. It would give the northern frontier enough time to swallow the Qingjiang dynasty and the Chuyun dynasty. Even if they wanted stability, taking back the land that the Shenwu dynasty had lost was a good choice. It would also give the northern frontier enough time to accumulate strength and build a foundation for conquering the world. It could be seen that family head Wu had put in a lot of effort before coming to the northern frontier. Not only did he see the northern frontier's ambition, but he even planned the easiest path for the northern frontier. If it was before, Li Zhong might really be tempted. But now, Li Zhong just wanted to spit on family head Wu's face. If family head Wu was not an idiot, then he wanted to push the northern frontier to the position of public enemy. Chapter 1164. It seemed like the latter was more likely because they would only have a chance to attack if the northern frontier became the public enemy. They could use the northern frontier's power and resources to quickly gain a foothold and improve themselves. When the northern frontier expanded to a certain extent and attracted the attention of all the empires, they could naturally join forces with the Deadwood dynasty to attack the northern frontier. They could also use the geographical advantage of being close to the northern frontier to devour a large amount of resources from the northern frontier to fatten themselves up. Li Zhong picked up the teacup next to him and squinted at Master Wu. He didn't say anything. Master Wu paused for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about where he had gone wrong. Then, his expression changed slightly. He cupped his hands at Li Zhong and said, "If the Northern Frontier King doesn't believe in our sincerity, we can use the Northern Frontier's name. If the Northern Frontier becomes the public enemy of all the empires, we won't be able to escape. Also, I can guarantee that all the benefits we get from the Frost Mirror Grassland will be given to you for free, except for the resources necessary for development, in exchange for the protection of the Northern Frontier." At this point, he revealed a warm smile and added, "We are really sincere."
Li Zhong was still looking at Master Wu.
After 2 breaths, he said with a fake smile. I've said that the Dragon King has other plans for the Frost Mirror grassland.
Even if I promise you, it's another matter whether I can do it or not.
Therefore, Master Wu, you're destined to come here for nothing.
Master Wu's expression changed suddenly. No matter what he said, he still wouldn't listen? He came here with a mission.
If he couldn't persuade Li Zhong to give up the Frost Mirror grassland, he didn't even dare to think about what would happen to him after he reported back.
Let's not talk about this anymore.
Li Zhong smiled and waved his hand, saying, Wu family head sincerity, I have indeed seen it.
However, I also have my own difficulties. Wu family head should be clear about this, right?
I'm only the king of the Northern Frontier in name. Apart from having a bit of authority in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, I can't mobilize any of the other government offices, let alone the Northern Frontier Army, which is independent of the administrative system.
Hiss. Hearing this, Patriarch Wu sucked in a breath of cold air.
Although he had long known that Li Zhong was only a puppet pushed forward by Lin Yuan, with the efforts of various forces, the introduction and implementation of the policies that benefited the people in the Northern Frontier were all placed on Li Zhong's head, and Lin Yuan, who had actually proposed all of this, was instead smeared as a cruel and ruthless demon beast. Under such circumstances, not to mention Li Zhong, who could become the king of the Northern Frontier, even a pig should have some influence, right?
However, he had to believe Li Zhong's words. Because the Northern Frontier was different from other dynasties. There was no such thing as an imperial court in the Northern Frontier. Each government office was an independent system. Whether Lin Yuan existed or not, Li Zhong was only the king of the Northern Frontier in name. He only had the power to approve the proposals of other government offices, reject the proposals, and let them reconsider. He would not have the power to kill his subordinates like other rulers in other places. However, didn't Li Zhong's words make it clear that in the Northern Frontier, only Lin Yuan's words carried weight? Li Zhong was not the only one who wanted to make this happen.
Unless he could persuade more than half of the government offices in the Northern Frontier and the military of the Northern Frontier, it was possible to force Lin Yuan to agree to this matter.
And it was just a possibility. Even if Li Zhong wanted to do something, those who supported him would only be the mortals who did not know the truth.
The local cultivators, aristocratic families, and even the itinerant cultivators who migrated from other places who knew who had the final say in the Northern Frontier were all on Lin Yuan's side.
Li Zhong could mobilize all the mortals in the Northern Frontier to try to overthrow Lin Yuan's rule.
For these cultivators who submitted to Lin Yuan, he had to kill as many of them as he could to make them not dare to continue to cause trouble. After thinking for a moment, Master Wu said in a deep voice, The king of the Northern Frontier has been oppressed by the Black Jiao to such a state. Don't you want to seize this opportunity to join forces with us to overthrow the Black Jiao's rule and monopolize the Northern Frontier? Li Zhong raised his eyebrows and said with great interest, It seems that Master Wu has come prepared.
Then tell me, what should I do to monopolize the Northern Frontier? If I join forces with you, how can I guarantee that I can defeat the Black Jiao?
And how can I guarantee that you, or the person behind you will not become the new Black Jiao and continue to step on my head and abuse me?
Master Wu smiled, and a sharp light suddenly flashed in his eyes. As expected, he knew that a capable person like Li Zhong would never be willing to submit to others. Moreover, the one who really ruled the Northern Frontier was a demon beast. Speaking of this, he was no longer sleepy. The king of the Northern Frontier should know that the Black Jiao is getting weaker and weaker. Before he went to the Endless Sea, there were 2 rebellions by the king of the Northern Frontier, but they were quickly suppressed by the Black Jiao. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Black Jiao at that time was completely righteous. Even if he attacked the rebels, they would be isolated and helpless. But you are different. You are now the king of benevolence that the people of the Northern Frontier talk about. Even if the Black Jiao wants to touch you, he still needs to see if the people below are willing or not, right? The label of rebellion can't be placed on your head. To put it bluntly, the Black Jiao is already unpopular. The people of the Northern Frontier can't wait for you to become the king of the Northern Frontier, and not the puppet king that the Black Jiao has pushed out. Also, as long as you are willing to be on good terms with the aristocratic families and sects, under the Black Jiao's oppressive rule, the various cultivation forces will definitely be dissatisfied. Even if the various forces don't dare to jump out to support you directly, they will also not completely fall to the Black Jiao's side. If you have our help behind the scenes, even if you can't kill the Black Jiao, driving it away won't be a problem. This is what the people want. The smile on Master Wu's face grew wider and wider, and he said, also that self-proclaimed crown prince of the Thousand Swords dynasty, Chou Wuiying, and his subordinate Lei Fan are now cooperating with us. As long as you agree, they will also be able to get your help. With the support of the people of the northern frontier and those people from the south, what are you worried about? Ding, ding, ding. Li Zhong's right hand gently knocked on the table, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. After a while, Li Zhong slowly raised his head, revealing a pair of bloodshot eyes, and said, "How can I believe that you won't replace the Black Jiao? Is there a difference between being the Black Jiao's puppet king and being your puppet king?" Chapter 1165. We're not that ambitious. Family head Wu smiled as he sipped his tea. The frost mirror grassland is enough for us to eat. If we try to take over the northern frontier, we'll definitely die. I can only say that you're overthinking things. Li Zhong was silent for a moment before he suddenly laughed. So, if we go according to your plan, what do I have to do? Or rather, what do I have to give you in order to gain your trust? The frost mirror grassland. Family head Wu's eyes flashed with fanaticism. We're not interested in the northern frontier. However, we won't allow the 7 empires to break apart the Qianwu continent. We'll establish a new Shuangjian dynasty. After that, as long as you maintain your current attitude, we'll help you reclaim the lost land of the Shenwu dynasty. He paused for a moment as he restrained the fanaticism in his eyes. You just have to convince Black Jiao to hand the Frost Mirror Grassland over to us. If possible, we also hope to obtain the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works. Whether it's manpower or materials, we're confident that we won't lose to the Northern Frontier. As long as you help us obtain the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works research, we'll be able to produce a large amount of related equipment very quickly. This will be extremely beneficial to you. The Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works. Li Zhong's expression suddenly became strange. The technology of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works could be considered black technology in the Qianwu world. It was several levels ahead of the other empires' technology, and even the Heavenly Gates technology. After all, it was a concept that Lin Yuan had brought over from his previous world. It completely abandoned the rigid requirements of the user's strength. The equipment produced by the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works could easily kill a cultivator if they were caught off guard. It was just like the battle at the Great Wall of the Northern Frontier. The Northern Frontier's army had only ignited their gunpowder without anyone controlling it, but they had still managed to destroy the Shueliao Knights. This had caused the only army of the Shuangjian dynasty that could contend with the Northern Frontier's dragon riders to be completely annihilated. It had also caused the Shuangjian dynasty's army to be forced into a desperate situation, unable to even break out of the encirclement. According to the Qianwu world's technology tree, different magical tools and treasures in the hands of different people would erupt with different effects. As a result, the same treasures with different cultivations could really be used to show off in front of Master Guan. However, the equipment produced by the Northern Frontier was different. It was just like how a child could easily kill an adult with a gun. The difference between the two was just that great. I'm afraid I cannot fulfill this request. Li Zhong sighed and said, "You might not know much about the Northern Frontier. Every government office in the Northern Frontier is an independent system. Different positions in the Northern Frontier have different levels of authority. For example, the Commander-in-Chief of the Embroidered Uniform Guards in the Northern Frontier is not inferior to my position as the King of the Northern Frontier. However, the Commander-in-Chief of the Embroidered Uniform Guards cannot even send a spy to the Ministry of Works. All the members of the Ministry of Works are secretly selected by the Dragon King. The authority of the Minister of Works is even higher than mine. It can be said that I am their superior in name, but the Minister of Works is still my superior in terms of authority." Li Zhong's expression turned ugly. He frowned and said, "Whether it is the ownership of the Frost Mirror Grassland or the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works, they are all matters that are far beyond my authority. Whether I can fulfill your request or not is another matter. Even if I can, I will be investigated immediately. Right now, I suspect that you have no intention of cooperating with me." "You misunderstood. You misunderstood." Wu family head's forehead was suddenly covered with a layer of cold sweat. Because of these few words,
The atmosphere that had been eased with great difficulty became cold again. Family head Wu wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said with an obsequious smile, "It's my fault, my fault. I didn't even know the situation in the northern region, so I made a rash request of you. However, these two conditions are things that we are determined to achieve. Since you can't do it for the time being, we won't force you. How about this? Please give me a list of people to see who we need to convince to achieve these conditions. I will try to convince them one by one. If anything happens, I will bear all the responsibility. How about it?" 4 hours later. Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion. Backyard. Li Zhong stood in front of Lin Yuan with his hands behind his back. He said in a deep voice, "That's the gist of it. However, the other party is very tight-lipped. They did not reveal which faction they belong to. During the conversation, they mentioned to me more than once that they do not want to annex the northern frontier or the other empires. They only want to maintain the structure of the 7 great empires in Tianwu continent. Therefore, I deduce that they want us to focus our attention on the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate." Lin Yuan thought for a moment and said, "Then do you think that it is possible that the other party is really the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate?" Li Zhong shook his head lightly and said, "There is indeed such a possibility, but the possibility is not high. Previously, the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate did not place spies in the northern frontier. Now, we can be sure that there are still people from the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate in the northern frontier. However, for Guardian of the Heavenly Gate like Ding Zai, unless it is absolutely necessary, they will not reveal their identity. Moreover, even if they reveal their identity, they will directly state which faction they belong to. This is their pride. Therefore, this group of people should want us to focus our attention on the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate. It would be best if there is a conflict with the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate. I suspect that they may have come from the south." "South? Demon sect disciples?" Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and said lightly, "Okay, I know. Continue to follow up on this matter. When necessary, you can reveal some research results of the Ministry of Works to them. However, there is no need to feed them too much. You can handle it yourself." "Yes." Li Zhong cupped his hands and said in a deep voice. After Li Zhong left, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Hong Jun, this guy was strong, but he always felt that he was suffering from paranoia. Originally, he was a grand cultivator who relied on the heavenly Tao to become his own body. In the end, he merged with the heavenly Tao and treated the heavenly Tao as a puppet. Later on, he directly suppressed the mortal and earth Taos. Now that he felt that the heavenly martial world was a threat to him, Hongjuan's movements were obviously bigger. First, it was the generals Hang and Ha, Mosquito Daoren and the others who came out in the open. Behind the scenes, there was also Yin Hong who was on the investiture of the gods list. Now, even the demon sect disciples who were related to the Nether River ancestor were involved in this matter. The invasion of the great desolate world into the heavenly martial world was obviously getting more and more serious. Chapter 1166. The investiture of the gods was an inescapable existence in the history of myths and legends. When talking about the investiture of the gods, it was impossible to avoid the mention of the immortals. It was also from the investiture of the gods that the eldritch world had never given birth to another powerful life form. For example, Neza and the monkey were worshipped by countless people. They were existences like the god of war. In essence, they were also chi refinement cultivators. Moreover, Neza killed the third prince and lost his life. He seemed to have revived, but he became a puppet in the hands of perfected Tai. As for the monkey's combat power, it was indeed debatable. The title of Great Sage equaling heaven was enough to describe the monkey's character, but it did not match his strength. It was not that the Great Sage equaling heaven was not worthy of the monkey. It was the monkey who was not worthy of the Great Sage equaling heaven. If the monkey wanted to wreak havoc in the heavenly palace and use the flower fruit mountain as the base, he would definitely go through the East Heavenly Gate. The monkey insisted on going to the South Heavenly Gate because the person guarding the East Heavenly Gate was someone the monkey did not dare to provoke. Not to mention that person, even that person's mount could beat up a monkey. The Grand Saint of 9 Spirits was that person's mount. According to the records in the Taoist books, a roar from the 9-headed lion could open the Hell's Gate. In the journey to the west, the Grand Saint of 9 Spirits also roared. He was an existence that could reach the 3 sages and the 9 springs. He was an unparalleled great demon that was respected by all kinds of lion demons as the ancestor. Compared to the monkey's self-titled great sage equaling heaven, the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits was undoubtedly more terrifying. In the original Journey to the West, when the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits was a demon in the lower realm, he did indeed beat the monkey. To be precise, he beat the monkey and Monk San together. The monkey could not escape from the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits even if he did a somersault. The West Heavenly Gate led directly to the Spirit Mountain in the west. The person guarding it was either a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. Similarly, they were existences that the monkey could not afford to provoke. As for the person guarding the North Heavenly Gate, it was Great Emperor Zhenwu, the existence that was known as the Demon Buster Patriarch. Even if the Grand Supreme and Hong Jun were to fight and the deities wanted to go easy on the monkey, there was still a rule. Great Emperor Zhenwu could not beat the monkey. Great Emperor Zhenwu's face therefore, the monkey only dared to act impudently at the Southern Heavenly Gate. After all, although the Southern Heavenly Gate had many guardians, the strongest was still the Grand Supreme Elder. The journey to the west was a trap, and the Grand Supreme Elder's attitude towards the monkey had always been ambiguous. It was normal for him to turn a blind eye to it. As for the other guardians, regardless of whether the guardians of the Southern Heavenly Gate were the four heavenly kings or the mighty miracle god, the monkey still had the ability to break through. Furthermore, after breaking through the Southern Heavenly Gate, the monkey had sneaked all the way and was only intercepted outside the Ling Shao Palace. There was no uproar in heaven at all. Because of the investiture of the gods, there was the investiture of the gods' cataclysm. Countless people who faced the investiture of the gods died on the investiture of the gods' cataclysm, which led to the heavenly court. However, before Haotian's celestial court, there was another celestial court in the untainted world, which was established by the East Emperor Tai and Emperor Jun. It was also called the Ancient Celestial Court, the Ancient Demon Court, and the First Celestial Court. At its peak, it regarded the way of heaven as nothing. This also meant that when Emperor Jun and the East Emperor Tai were in charge of the untainted world, Hong Jun, Tao Ancestor and the six destined sages all had to stand aside. What was more terrifying was that during the Ancient Demon Court, the demon tribe was not the only dominant force. Another force that could compete with the Ancient Demon Court was the 12 Ancestors of Sorcery and the Ancient Sorcerer Tribe, which were formed by Pan Gu's essence and blood. The 12 Ancestors of Sorcery were the masters of the 12 Great Ways. When they joined forces to set up the 12 Celestial Demons formation, they could condense the real body of Pan Gu, which had the power to destroy the world. As a result, the Demon Tribe controlled the sky and the Sorcerer Tribe controlled the land, which almost divided the untainted world into two. At that time, the Ancient Demon Court had 10 demon commanders, also known as the 10 Demon Kings and the 10 Demon Saints. In addition, there was a Demon Master Kuanping, who almost became one of the 6 destined sages. At the peak of the Ancient Demon Court, any one of them was not inferior to the Celestial Court later. The Sorcerer Tribe and the Demon Tribe were so strong that Hong Jun had no choice but to use the power of the Way of Heaven to start the cultivation tribulation of the Great War of the Sorcerer Tribe and the Demon Tribe. In addition to his series of calculations, he pushed the Demon Tribe to the bottom of the untainted world and almost destroyed the Sorcerer Tribe. If it were not for the protection of Empress Pingxin, who was formed by the primordial spirit of Hutu, who was schemed by Hong Jun, the Sorcerer Tribe would have been completely destroyed. Now, before Lin Yuan could figure out what was going on with the Ancient Demon Court in the Qianwu world, he had encountered Generals Hang, Ha and Yin Hong, who were listed on the investiture of the gods during the investiture of the gods' tribulation. All kinds of signs were reminding him that the heavenly court of the great desolate world had probably arranged many hidden hands in the Qianwu world, waiting to plot against him. It was hard to say what the background of the Wu family head and his gang, who claimed to be suppressed by Lei Qiusheng, were. But somehow, Lin Yuan felt that this gang had something to do with the celestial court of the untainted world.
So, who is it?
Lin Yuan closed his eyes slightly and quickly calculated in his mind. He went through the existence of the heavenly court god system one by one, but he still couldn't find any clues. At the very least, the information he had at hand couldn't confirm that the other party was related to the heavenly court, let alone analyze who the big boss of the heavenly court behind them was through this information. For the time being, Sanqing and Sanqing's disciples could be ruled out. Lin Yuan really did not believe that sect master Tong Tian would plot against Hong Jun, and Taishang Dao ancestor would fall out with him directly. Only the primeval Lord of Heaven would be able to watch from the side. The main reason was that the primeval Lord of Heaven was not an honest person.
Yin Shang. Suddenly, a light flashed in Lin Yuan's mind.
In the investiture of God's cataclysm, there were not only disciples of the three religions who were on the list of gods. Not to mention generals like Hang and Ha in the mortal world, there were many people in the royal family of Yin Shang who were forcibly sent to the list of gods. To be precise, there were many people in the royal family of Yin Shang who were forcibly sent to the list of gods.
To be precise, Ji Chong and GFA did not want to keep these traitors alive. Firstly, their identities would threaten their rule. Secondly, they were officials of Yin Shang who had betrayed DXIN. If they were allowed to live and spread the news, it would threaten the ruling position of the Zhou dynasty. Therefore, these traitors were basically killed by Zhang Zia and the father and son of the Ji family. After they were killed, they simply fabricated a few false images and bragged about them. Then, they became the loyal people who were killed by the tyrant. Many people said that changing history started from the Tang dynasty. In fact, it was not. Changing history had always been a bad habit of the Confucian sect. As the founder of the Confucian sect, the Zhou dynasty would certainly not lose this skill. For example, Bygone, who had the heart of 7 orifices, had a glorious and positive image in history. In fact, what Bygone did was really inhumane. Chapter 1167. Bygone was a member of the royal family of the Shang dynasty. When DXIN saw Bygone, he had to respectfully call him uncle. When he was young, he did not defeat DE and became a loser in the struggle for imperial power. However, the struggle for imperial power at that time was not as cruel as the struggle between father and son and brothers. Therefore, DE did not kill Bygone. Instead, he entrusted Bygone with an important task. Bygone was overjoyed at that time, thinking that he had finally killed DE. Although he was not young anymore, he could still enjoy the supreme imperial power for the rest of his life. Therefore, he assisted DXIN with the heart of being a powerful minister. However, he did not expect that DXIN was even fiercer than his father. He used women and slaves, personally went to the people to experience the hardships, prepare for war, and expand the territory. It could be said that there was nothing wrong in all aspects. However, DXIN broke the class structure and used a large number of talented people who were born as slaves, directly threatening the status of the aristocrats. In addition, he was strict with the law and emphasized that if the emperor violated the law, he would be punished the same as the common people. Not to mention that the punishment could not be imposed on the scholar officials. It was already good enough that he did not add a level to the crime of knowingly breaking the law. Therefore, Bygone did not do it. Not only did he not become a regent, but he also lost his original power. Therefore, when he knew that Shi Qi wanted to rebel, Bygone still flirted with Ji Chong and GFA. When King Zhou went south to expand the territory and left a large number of elite troops to guard the newly acquired territory, Bygone directly launched an attack signal to Zhang Zia. In addition, DXIN never looked at the identity of those who broke the law. Not to mention the vassals who had disloyal thoughts. Even those who did not want to be the emperor had to think about whether they would fall into the hands of DXIN if they broke the law. In the Shang dynasty, the emperor was respected and not the king. Compared to the so-called king of Zhou, the emperor of the Shang dynasty could really kill and seize. Therefore, the image of a licentious and tyrannical tyrant appeared vividly on the paper. All the warlords returned to their armies and went straight to Chaoga. They had to rely on a bunch of traitors to barely annihilate Yin Shang. After that, they went all the way and killed most of the traitors of Yin Shang. Therefore, a series of names such as Bygone, Yin Hong, and Yin Jiao appeared on the investiture of the gods. It could be considered as an early example of, once the cunning hare is killed, the hound is cooked. The reputation of these traitors was as good as it could be. They were better than the traitors who wanted to seize the power of the Shang dynasty and even betray the country. They ate the salary given by DXIN and were loyal to the father and son of the Ji family. They were even given the title of Eternal Loyal Minister. It was even more ridiculous to say that he was licentious and tyrannical. King Zhou only had 3 sons in his life, which were Yin Hong, Yin Jiao, and Wugang. Ji Chong claimed to have hundreds of sons. Just in Lin Yuan's previous life, there were as many as 17 of them who could testify. Therefore sometimes, one really could not be too serious. When he thought of this, Lin Yuan clearly felt that the light in his mind became clearer.
This kind of style that was passable on the surface but liked to play dirty tricks in the dark. Moreover, he could drive Yin Hong to the northern frontier. He was afraid that it was really a literati star who did it.
At the same time,
Baigon, whose god name was called by Lin Yuan, suddenly shivered and looked in the direction of the northern frontier, dumbfounded.
Is there something wrong with this Black Jiao's brain?
I didn't even show my face, and you still think that I was the one who ordered Yin Hong to go to the northern frontier to cause trouble for you? Although Baigon was a literati star, he had never been very popular. After all, the Zhou dynasty was chaotic to begin with. After GFA's death, there was a rebellion among the three eunuchs. After that, the various lords fought and killed each other, and the people fought until their brains were fried. The Spring and Autumn Warring States period was an era where hundreds of schools of thought contended. Although there were hundreds of schools of thought contending in the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, Confucianism was never the orthodox school of thought. The three schools of thought were the main schools of thought in the Spring and Autumn Warring States period. In that kind of chaotic era, people did not ask for a literati star, who was talented in literature, to descend to the mortal world. They wanted an all-rounder who could kill enemies on horseback and pacify the country when they dismounted. Liu Bang, who took over the foundation of the Qin dynasty, was known as the ancestor of Confucianism. He was very good at asking others to be saints and playing with double standards. However, he was also a ruthless person who ruled the world with law. Even when he was in decline, he supplemented it with Elder Huang's teachings. Worshipping gods was not popular in the Han dynasty at all. Later on, Emperor Wu of Han dismissed hundreds of schools of thought and only respected Confucianism. However, he was also a scholar with the skin of Confucianism and the bones of Confucianism. Even Liu Che used the teachings of the school of war more than the teachings of Confucianism. In fact, if Confucianism had not proposed the concept of great unification, Emperor Wu of Han would not have cared about this group of hypocrites. During the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, there were countless lords and lords everywhere. Every school of thought could make the country strong and rich. Only Confucianism could be said to be, whoever used it will die. It was only during the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty that Confucianism became popular, especially during the Song dynasty. Even if one had the title of Xiaocai, one would not kneel to an official. This made some gods who were in charge of literary talent very popular. It was also at that time that Baigon's incense flourished. However, it was also thrown aside after a few years. Among the gods of the heavenly court, Baigon could be said to be at the bottom. If it was not for his quick thinking, he really would not be able to command the 5-grain star sovereign Yin Hong of the fighting division. This time, their group lost Yu Jiang and injured Yin Hong. Even Di Xian's fist that contained the will of the human king smashed into the northern frontier. It would definitely not be able to recover in a short time. At this time, if he was caught by Lin Yuan, even if he did not die, he would lose a layer of skin. What a pity! Baigon gently smacked his lips twice. His gaze was as gloomy as water. He murmured, "Although Hanba has been in seclusion for many years, I did not expect his mind to be so clear." "Humph, you saw through my plan and did not want to be my knife. How can I continue to let you live?" As his voice fell, Baigon had already turned into a ray of light and escaped towards his cave residence. A moment later, a blood-winged black mosquito fell out of the void. Its breath was almost dispirited to the extreme, as if a gust of wind could directly blow it to death. However, Mosquito Doran's gaze was very calm. It swept across the direction that Baigon escaped in, and a thoughtful look flashed in his eyes. He had already escaped from Lin Yuan's control for 3 days, but he still could not think of a way to go. After all, he came here on Hongjuan's orders. If he could not complete the mission, even with the protection of the Taishang Dao ancestor, Hongjun could make him suffer a fate worse than death. However, against that extremely strange Black Jiao, he felt that he really did not have much chance of winning.
Chapter 1170.
The Black Jiao of the Northern Frontier, or simply the Northern Frontier, could be said to have a reputation. However, it was only a reputation. Even the Heavenly Martial World's overlord, the guardian of the Heavenly Martial World, had people like Wei Li and Lin Yuan as enemies, let alone the Northern Frontier, whose overall strength was slightly stronger than the other empires, but was still some distance away from becoming a first-rate force.
The southern demonic beast range couldn't be compared to the Hengduan mountain range and the endless sea. However, with the southern demonic beast Venerable holding the fort, it could be said to have suppressed the Qingjiang Empire and the Chuyun Empire for many years. In terms of military strength, the Qingjiang Empire directly gave up on resisting the southern demonic beast range, and the Chuyun Empire's trump card, the Chuyun Tiger soldiers, had even put in 120% of their energy to keep an eye on the southern demonic beast range. In terms of economic strength, they had also been using the gold squandering den and the Qingjiang Empire to harvest all kinds of resources from the Chuyun Empire and the Qingjiang Empire. Perhaps the southern demonic beast range couldn't compare to the Shenwu Empire and the Deadwood Empire, but the confidence they had cultivated in the Qingjiang Empire and the Chuyun Empire made it impossible for them to run away in front of the northern frontier. Furthermore, 11 of the 12 demonic pillars of the southern demonic beast range had come. With such a lineup, it didn't matter who the leader of the northern frontier was. Unless the Black Jiao personally came, they had the confidence to put up a fight. Taking a step back, if the Black Jiao personally came, they could just turn around and leave. Because that way, their strategic goal would have been successfully achieved. The relationship between the southern demonic beast range and the northern frontier could be said to be like fire and water. It wasn't that the gold squandering den and the Chuyun village couldn't enter the northern frontier to harvest resources, but the southern demonic beast range's previous actions were equivalent to declaring war on the northern frontier. The relationship between the two sides had reached a point where only one side would be able to rest. Perhaps there was still room for discussion before, but after the Hengduan mountain range incident, the Black Jiao had already announced that even if their Lord Demon Venerable was willing to lower himself to mend the relationship with the northern frontier, with the Black Jiao's temper, he would flip the table. There weren't many people in the world who were fools. The northern frontier's current strategy, the northern frontier's strategy, but after the other empires saw the northern frontier and empire's confrontation with the Deadwood Empire, they would definitely relax their guard against the northern frontier. This was a very reasonable thing. No one demonic beast range had the northern frontier. Therefore, when the northern frontier restricted themselves, they would only be happy to see it happen. Perhaps only the Deadwood Empire would be unhappy. What the southern wilderness demonic beast range did was to force the northern frontier to give up on the most difficult path and attack the Qingjiang Empire and the Chuyun Empire, which were easier to take down. As for how to make the northern frontier change their strategy, it was very simple. Harass. As long as they provoked the northern frontier would definitely mobilize a large-scale army, high-level cultivators, and demonic beasts to fight back. However, once things developed to this stage, it would be very difficult for the northern frontier to turn around and attack the Deadwood Empire. This was because war was a battle of resources. Food, equipment, and population were all necessary factors. No one doubted that the northern frontier's wealth could support one or two nation-destroying wars. No one even doubted that the northern frontier had enough resources to completely destroy the empires. However, it would undoubtedly take a lot of time to turn these resources into cash. Starting a war with the Deadwood Empire at the northern frontier was actually the best decision. First, it was to restrict him as much as possible so that the other empires would let down their guard against the northern territory. But strictly speaking, the Withered Tree Empire was a bone that he had to gnaw on, and it was already tough enough now. If he left the Withered Tree Empire for last, who knew how powerful the Withered Tree Empire would become after absorbing the remnants of the other empires that had failed? Second, after starting a war with the Deadwood Empire, the rhythm of the northern frontier's war would definitely change from a blitzkrieg to a protracted war. Without a few years of effort, they would not be able to devour the Deadwood Empire. Even if they did, it would take a lot of time to digest the remnants of the previous dynasty and deal with the local sects and clans. Just like Lei Qiusheng, who had established his country for decades, he still could not completely wipe out the remnants of the Zhao clan. What Lin Yuan wanted to do was even more extreme. He did not want to devour the previous dynasty's imperial family. Instead, he wanted to suppress all the clans and wipe out all the sects. Once they entered a protracted war, the northern frontier would have an endless supply of soldiers and all kinds of resources. After completely devouring the Deadwood Empire, they would turn around and attack the other empires. Although it was not as simple as an adult beating up a child, it would greatly reduce the difficulty. What the Southern Wasteland's Demon Vein was doing now was to forcefully drag the northern frontier into a blitzkrieg, forcing the northern frontier to devour the Azure River Empire and the Deadwood Empire. Then, they would become the public enemy of all the empires in the Tianwu world.
At that time, it would be much easier for them to form an alliance to suppress the northern frontier. In any case, I will not retreat. Yushi looked at Fei Xian with disdain and said coldly, if that Black Jiao is willing to play, I will play with him until the end. Let's see what kind of almighty being that Black Jiao is. First, he killed third brother. Then he plotted against a demon venerable.
Yushi rolled his eyes and looked at Chen Yu.
His expression was somewhat unsightly. Although the Southern Wasteland's 12 demon pillars was a collective name, it did not mean that they were all as close as brothers. On the contrary, the Southern Wasteland's 12 demon pillars were divided into various groups due to their different personalities and territories. Not only were their relationships not harmonious, there were even a few demon pillars who had personal grudges against each other. Fei Xian knew how powerful the northern frontier was, so he was not willing to fight head-on with the northern frontier. However, Yushi was different. Whether it was in terms of ability or personality, Yushi was a hawk through and through. Previously, when the Black Jiao suddenly attacked the Rising Cloud Empire, it was Yushi's doing. Later on, the Rising Cloud Empire stabilized and did not continue to be encroached upon by Yushi. However, it was an indisputable fact that the Rising Cloud Empire had been ruthlessly bitten off a piece of meat. However, to a dove like Fei Xian who valued harmony, Yushi's actions were undoubtedly self-destructive. After all, although the Rising Cloud Empire had established the Rising Cloud Tiger soldiers to guard against the Southern Wasteland's demon vein, in reality, the relationship between the two parties had always been good. Otherwise, the Southern Wasteland's demon venerable would not have been able to request the Rising Cloud Tiger soldiers to attack the Northern Frontier's army. However, Yushi took advantage of the Black Jiao's attack to destroy the Rising Cloud Empire's imperial court and the demon venerable's seclusion to recuperate. He did not even discuss with them in advance and privately mobilized his troops to attack the Rising Cloud Empire. The subsequent Southern Wasteland's demon veins military forces were all contributed by the other demon pillars when they knew that the relationship between the two parties was irreparable. However, in the end, the only one who attempted to annex the Rising Cloud Empire was Yushi alone. Chapter 1171. It was the same for the Chuyun dynasty, and it was the same for the northern frontier? Although Fei Xian had opinions about the Chuyun dynasty, he would not voice them out directly. This was because there was no right or wrong in this world. The one with the bigger fist was the reason. This time, the Chuyun dynasty was almost completely annihilated. It was normal for the southern wilderness demon range to take a bite out of them. But what about the northern frontier? For some reason, the Sky Demon did not provoke the northern frontier at all. Instead, he wandered around the empty south and eliminated the sects and clans that had the strength to take root in the south of the Shenwu dynasty. From a strategic point of view, the Sky Demon's actions were completely for the northern frontier. When the northern frontier turned around and devoured the Sky Demon, they could smoothly take over the entire Shenwu dynasty's territory. Moreover, there would not be a second voice that would hinder the development of the northern frontier. Under such circumstances, the northern frontier had quelled the chaos in the Hengduan Mountains and forced the Shuangjian dynasty to a dead end. It was a complete victory. With this victory, no matter who the northern frontier faced next, they would definitely be irresistible in the early stages. What was the difference between provoking the northern frontier at this time and courting death? Even if they provoked the northern frontier for the sake of a strategic victory, anyone with a discerning eye would know that it was just an excuse. Everyone knew that once the northern frontier went west, they would definitely devour the Qingjiang dynasty and the Chuyun dynasty to minimize their future enemies. How could the southern wilderness demon range that was sandwiched between the two dynasties be spared? Not to mention that it was the southern wilderness demon range that was provoking the northern frontier this time. Fei Xian could not comment on the strategic layout of the southern wilderness demon range. However, he knew very well that once he did that, the southern wilderness demon range would definitely be destroyed. Idiots like Yushi probably thought that it was the demon venerable's confidence and most likely wanted to bite off a piece of meat from the northern frontier. However, they never thought that with the demon venerable's strength, he could go anywhere he wanted. Whether it was the Hengduan Mountains or the Endless Sea, he could live very well. But what about them? They were just a bunch of ordinary demonic beasts. Even if the 12 demonic pillars were at the demonic king realm, after offending the Black Flood Dragon, the Endless Sea and the Hengduan Mountain Range would be benevolent if they didn't help the Black Flood Dragon. As for the other human empires, there was no place for demonic beasts like them. Fei Xian stared at Yu Shi with a gloomy face and said coldly, "Invincible? You really dare to say that? Don't you know how to think before you open your mouth? If the northern frontier really invades the west, the Qingjiang Empire and the Chuyun Empire will definitely perish. How can we, the southern wilderness, be spared? With just the 11 of us demon kings, do you expect the demon venerable to defeat the Black Jiao?" At the same time, the 12th Ji Qian, who was the youngest of the 12 demon pillars, also said, "Lord Demon Venerable defeated the Black Jiao? Ha! If Lord Demon Venerable really has such ability, then he wouldn't force the northern frontier to attack us. To put it bluntly, Lord Demon Venerable just wants to drag the northern frontier down with him. If Lord Demon Venerable really has such ability, then why not take advantage of the northern frontier and the Withered Wood Empire to lead us to backstab the northern frontier?" At this point he paused and added, "Of course, what I'm saying is that even if the southern wilderness and the northern frontier perish together, our Lord Demon Venerable's strength is still there. Without the southern wilderness, he can still live comfortably. There were never so many fools in the world. When you treat others as fools, then you are the real fool." Now, the Demon Venerable clearly wanted to give up on the southern wilderness and drag the northern frontier down with him. At this juncture, their Lord Demon Venerable was in seclusion recuperating. It was obvious that he did not want to get involved. When the northern frontier got angry, they would all be abandoned. 12. You think so too? Yu Shi glared at Ji Qian fiercely and growled, "I don't know what's so great about that Black Jiao to make all of you so afraid. Yes, I admit that the northern frontier is developing very quickly, but the northern frontier might not be able to defeat us southern wilderness. Why are all of you so pessimistic before the war even starts?" Fei Xian sneered and said, "It's not that we're afraid, it's that you're too stupid. You didn't see clearly what kind of trap was hidden behind this matter. Only you foolishly jumped into it." Yu Shi's eyes turned cold. The killing intent on his body suddenly skyrocketed. Bang! Chen Yu suddenly slammed the table heavily. He glanced at Yu Shi, Fei Xian, and Ji Qian's faces and said, "I understand what you mean. Stop arguing." Chen Yu looked like he was playing the peacemaker, but in fact, his actions were no different from declaring his position. Because the southern wilderness army was still attacking the northern frontier, and the 12 Fei pillars were still here. Chen Yu's words were to shut Fei Xian and Ji Qian up. "Boss, but..." Fei Xian stared at Chen Yu, unwilling to give up. Chen Yu narrowed his eyes and coldly interrupted Fei Xian's words. "You're right. The Demon Venerable is using us in the southern wilderness as pawns to fight the northern frontier. You she really believe that we could defeat the northern frontier? That's really stupid. But then again, aren't you and Ji Qian just as stupid?" Fei Xian and Ji Qian looked at each other. They didn't quite understand what Chen Yu meant. Since they already knew that the Demon Venerable was going to use them as pawns, were they still going to follow the Demon Venerable's wishes? It was wrong to do so, so how could it be wrong not to do so? Chen Yu sighed and said helplessly, "Don't forget that we're still the 12 Fei pillars of the southern wilderness. Above us are the Demon Venerables. If you quit now, yes, you can make the northern region ignore us. But do you think you can protect the southern wasteland demon veins just like that? Why? Do all of you think that the Demon Venerable is already dead?" Chen Yu's words froze the atmosphere. Thinking about it this way, it was really wrong to do or not to do it. If they didn't provoke the northern frontier wouldn't attack them now. But how would they explain it to the Demon Venerable when they returned? The Demon Venerable's strength was there for all to see. Not to mention Fei Xian and Ji Qian, even the 12 Fei pillars. Oh, now it's the 11 Fei pillars. They might not be able to defeat the Demon Venerable even if they fought together. Then, aren't we dead meat? Min Yu, the 5th-ranked Fei pillar, asked with a trembling voice. Instantly, all the Fei pillars fell silent. It was as if no one dared to face this bloody question. Should they choose to live a little longer or die immediately? How could they solve such a question? Chapter 1172. Chen Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. He glanced at the despairing demon pillars and sighed once more. He could not help but feel disappointed. After all, it was not a good experience to be teammates with a bunch of pigs. After a moment of silence, Chen Yu said slowly, "You can't say that. With our current position,
It's true that we'll die whether we do it or not. But what if we change our position? Everyone here is a demon king. Even in the northern frontier, we'll be strong. If we join the northern frontier Black Jiao and get accepted, we'll win this game. What kind of joke is this?
Yushi suddenly stood up in a somewhat irritable manner and roared, "Submit to that black flood dragon?"
Boss, do you know what you're saying? Even if we're willing to join, that Black Jiao has to be willing to accept us. What we're doing now, isn't it just forcing the northern frontier to die? If you want to join the northern frontier now, isn't it just a matter of time before we die? Ji Qian's eyes suddenly flashed with a touch of understanding, and he said with a bright idea, "I understand. I get it. Boss, you can actually win this game. Amazing." Chen Yu's plan was not complicated. Therefore, Ji Qian understood Chen Yu's warning after a moment of deduction. They were now on the side of the 12 demon pillars of the southern wasteland, so they naturally had to work for the southern wasteland demon range. Whether they were willing or not, it could even be said that the demon venerable was actually aware of their plans. However, as long as they did not immediately surrender to the northern region, the demon venerable could not possibly deal with them now. This was because everyone would have the idea of surrendering to the enemy at a critical moment. It was just that some people did it, while others gave up on the idea in an instant and kept spurning it. Thinking of betraying and actually betraying were two completely different concepts. As for whether they would join the northern frontier, that would depend on how the northern frontier handled this matter. If the northern frontier could hold back their anger and continue with their previous strategy, the southern wilderness demon mountain range would gain some advantage in the short term. However, in the near future, the northern frontier would definitely defeat the southern wilderness. Under such circumstances, if the 11 demon pillars were to join the northern region, it would be equivalent to standing on the side of the victor. Even if they would have some negative labels on them, the chances of the northern region accepting them at this time was undoubtedly very high. What would happen in the future could be dealt with in the future, but whether or not they could survive now depended on this move. Shallow. It was simply too shallow. At this moment, Ji Qian could not help but despise his previous plan. No wonder Boss sighed. On the other side. In the prince's mansion of the northern frontier, Lin Yuan saw the anxious Zhao Guangchong. He grinned and said, "I already know your purpose. Li Zhong's idea is my idea. When you go back, prepare to build your army in the west. I will personally supervise the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Works to fulfill the conditions that Li Zhong promised you." "No, teacher." Zhao Guangchong looked more and more anxious. He said with threatening gestures, "The West is really in a mess now. There are constant killings every day. Outside the city, there are killings between the Northern Battlefront Army and the Southern Wilderness Demon Army. Inside the city, there are killings between the Gold Squandering Cave, the Gentle Village, and the Demon Emperor Association. Every day at dawn, we have to deal with at least 1,000 corpses. Moreover, the Southern Wilderness has been making a lot of moves recently. The killings between the two sides are getting more and more intense. If we don't have enough power to kill them directly, the Demon Emperor and the Imperial Brocade Guards will not be able to cover this up." Now that the northern frontier had dealt with the Hengduan Mountain Range and the Shuangjian dynasty, those who were hiding in the dark gradually stopped. If the news that the southern wilderness kept harassing the northern frontier was spread out, these people would definitely be active again. At that time, the northern frontier would be dragged into the quagmire again. The conditions that Li Zhong promised? That was not even enough to fill the gap between the teeth. Lin Yuan looked at Zhao Guangchong with a smile, as if he didn't realize the seriousness of this matter at all. After a while, Lin Yuan said, "We are clear about this matter. We know how to deal with it. Trust me. Just do as Li Zhong said. It won't be long before you get a group of strong reinforcements. Then, just guard the door of the northern frontier well." Strong reinforcements? Zhao Guangchong's breathing became a little faster. He couldn't understand Lin Yuan's meaning at all. After all, the situation of the northern frontier was right there. Li Zhong would definitely fulfill the conditions that he promised him. However, those things that Li Zhong didn't agree to, Li Zhong wouldn't do anything either. Then where would the strong reinforcements come from? However, as a member of the first batch of the Blackwater Army and the lieutenant who had the best development in the Blackwater Army, Zhao Guangchong naturally saluted Lin Yuan with a northern frontier military salute. His anxious expression eased a lot as he walked out of the door. Even so, Zhao Guangchong was still thinking. Where did the strong reinforcements come from? Qingjiang dynasty? Impossible. The Qingjiang dynasty could be said to be in a terrible fix. The Baixing Navy had to patrol the Wei River constantly to guard against the sky demons' attacks and the demonic beasts that were causing trouble along the Wei River. They also had to snipe the refugees who tried to escape into the Qingjiang dynasty. Who knew how many northern frontier agents and people possessed by the sky demon were among them? The other armies of the Qingjiang dynasty couldn't be counted on. The Yunmeng Navy, which was as famous as the Baixing Navy, had to guard against the southern wilderness and the Chuyun dynasty. They even had to keep an eye on the situation in the Hengduan mountain range and the Endless Sea. Compared to the Baixing Navy, the Yunmeng Navy, which was much more low-key, was the foundation of the Qingjiang dynasty. Once something happened to the Yunmeng Navy, the Qingjiang dynasty would be one step away from being destroyed. Other armies? The Qingjiang dynasty didn't have any other armies. The other armies of the Qingjiang dynasty were only slightly stronger than the militia. The Chuyun dynasty? That was even more impossible. Everyone knew that the Chuyun dynasty couldn't even fend for themselves now. Not to mention taking the initiative to attack other forces, the new emperor of the Chuyun dynasty would probably be laughing in his dreams if they could reclaim the territory that the southern wilderness had taken advantage of. The Chuyun dynasty was not far from being destroyed now. They were only slightly stronger than the Shuangjian dynasty. At least, although their lives weren't in their hands, they could still struggle a little. Whether the Shuangjian dynasty would be destroyed or not depended on whether the northern frontier was willing to lift a hand and let this reckless little brother off. Once the northern frontier wanted to kill them, they wouldn't even have the strength to fight back. As for the matter of strong reinforcements, the more he thought about it, the more impossible it was. However, after Lin Yuan agreed, Zhao Guangchong actually had an inexplicable confidence. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.